Victoria Hale had built an empire on control, but she couldn't control grief. When her husband died, her 9-year-old son stopped laughing, stopped trying, stopped being a child. The silence in their mansion became unbearable, a constant reminder of everything she'd lost. Then one morning she came home early and heard it, laughter. Real, unguarded joy echoing from a room that had been locked for months. She followed the sound and found her son with their groundskeeper, a man she barely knew. What she witnessed next would shatter everything she thought she understood about power, trust, and second chances. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. Part 1. The sound she thought was gone forever. The Mercedes pulled through the iron gates at 10:47 a.m., 3 hours earlier than Victoria Hale had planned. The board meeting had collapsed in 40 minutes instead of 4 hours. Jensen had caved on the merger terms faster than she'd anticipated, which meant she'd won, again, without even breaking stride. Victory had become routine, predictable, almost boring. She texted her assistant to clear the afternoon, told her driver Marcus to take the scenic route home, and leaned back against leather seats that cost more than most people's cars. Through tinted windows, the city blurred past, steel and glass monuments to ambition, each building a testament to someone's hunger for more. Her phone buzzed. Another email. Another opportunity. Another zero to add to a number that had stopped meaning anything years ago. Victoria Hale was 30 years old and controlled a tech empire worth $4 billion. She had homes on 3 continents, a closet full of designer clothes she'd never wear, and a reputation that made grown men stammer in boardrooms. She had everything except the one thing that mattered. The car rolled up the circular driveway of the Hale estate, a sprawling modern masterpiece of glass and stone nestled in 10 acres of manicured grounds. Marcus opened her door and she stepped out into crisp autumn air, her heels clicking against imported Italian stone. "Mrs. Hale, I wasn't expecting you back, so—" Helen, the head housekeeper, appeared at the entrance, surprise evident in her usually composed expression. "The meeting ended early." Victoria handed over her coat without slowing. "Where's Christopher?" "In his room, I believe. He finished his tutoring session about an hour ago." Victoria nodded, already moving through the foyer. The house was immaculate as always. Helen ran it like a 5-star hotel. Everything in its place. Everything perfect. Everything silent. Too silent. Since Richard died 18 months ago, the silence had become a living thing. It filled rooms like water, drowning out memories of laughter, of music, of a husband's voice calling from the kitchen, of a child's footsteps racing through halls. Now there was just the clock in the library, the hum of the refrigerator, the whisper of the HVAC system circulating air through empty spaces. Victoria climbed the curved staircase to the second floor, her mind already organizing the afternoon. She'd check on Christopher, maybe suggest they have lunch together on the terrace. He'd probably say no. He always said no lately, but she'd ask anyway. Then she'd retreat to her office for the calls she couldn't avoid. She was 3 steps from his door when she heard it. Laughter. Victoria froze, one hand on the banister, her heart suddenly loud in her ears. It wasn't possible. Christopher hadn't laughed in months. Not since the funeral. Not since he'd stood beside her in his too small suit, silent and hollow-eyed, while they lowered his father into the ground. But there it was again, clear and bright and utterly real. Her son's laughter, the sound she'd thought had been buried with Richard. The sound was coming from the wrong direction. Not from Christopher's room, but from the east wing. From Richard's study, the room she'd locked the day of the funeral and hadn't opened since. The room where his papers still sat on the desk, his jacket still hung on the chair, his reading glasses still rested on the side table next to a book he'd never finish. Victoria's feet moved before her mind caught up, carrying her down the hallway toward that closed door. The laughter grew louder, joined now by another voice, deeper, masculine, but not Richard's. Never Richard's again. Her hand touched the doorknob. It turned easily. The door swung open, and Victoria Hale, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, who had stared down hostile board members and aggressive competitors without blinking, who had rebuilt her life from ruins without breaking, stopped breathing. The study looked exactly as Richard had left it. Same mahogany desk, same floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, Same leather chair that still held the impression of his body, but everything else was different. Christopher sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, his dark hair falling across his forehead the way Richard's used to. He was laughing, actually laughing. His face lit up with an expression Victoria hadn't seen in so long she'd almost forgotten what joy looked like on her son. And beside him, sitting on the floor in dirt-stained work clothes, was Ethan Cole, the groundskeeper. A man she'd spoken to maybe 3 times since he'd started 6 months ago. A man who kept his head down, did his work, and disappeared before anyone noticed him. Except her son had noticed. On the rug between them lay an array of objects, leaves, stones, a length of rope, what looked like origami shapes folded from notebook paper. Christopher held a small ball of crumpled paper, his face scrunched in concentration as Ethan spoke. "Okay, so remember what we said about gravity," Ethan was saying, his voice low and patient. "What happens when you throw the ball straight up?" "It comes back down," Christopher answered immediately. "Right. And why?" "Because Earth is pulling it." "Exactly. Earth's gravity pulls on everything, the ball, you, me, even the air. Now, what if you throw the ball really, really hard, like impossibly hard?" Christopher's brow furrowed in thought. "It would go higher?" "Yeah, but what if you threw it so hard that it kept going? What if you threw it so fast that even though Earth was pulling, the ball was moving too quick to fall back?" Victoria watched her son's eyes widen. "Would it just keep going?" "It would orbit, like the moon. The moon is basically falling toward Earth all the time, but it's also moving sideways so fast that it keeps missing. It's falling forever without ever hitting the ground." Ethan picked up one of the stones and held it up. "That's what satellites do. They're just falling really, really gracefully." Christopher stared at the stone, then at the crumpled paper ball in his hand, and then he laughed again. "That's so cool! So the moon is just falling in a circle?" "Basically, yeah. You got it, buddy." Victoria must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath maybe, or the creak of a floorboard, because both heads turned toward her. Christopher's smile vanished instantly. The light in his eyes guttered out like a candle. His shoulders hunched, and he dropped the paper ball, his whole body language shifting from open and engaged to closed and defensive in a heartbeat. It was like watching her son disappear. Ethan Cole stood in one fluid motion, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Hale, I apologize. We shouldn't be in here. I'll clean this up and... What's going on?" Victoria's voice came out sharper than she intended. Christopher flinched. "We were just..." Ethan began, but Victoria cut him off. "Christopher, what are you doing in here? You know this room is..." She stopped herself. "Off limits? Forbidden? A shrine to grief?" "I'm sorry, Mom." Christopher's voice was small, defeated. The voice he'd been using for 18 months. "We were just... It was my fault. I asked Mr. Cole if... It was my idea, Mrs. Hale," Ethan interrupted quietly. "Christopher was asking about how planes work during lunch, and I thought the study might have some books that could help explain it better. I should have asked your permission first. It won't happen again." Victoria looked between them. Her son, who couldn't meet her eyes. The groundskeeper, who stood there calmly taking responsibility for whatever this was. "Christopher, go to your room." "But Mom..." "Now." Her son fled. She heard his footsteps racing down the hallway, heard his door slam. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Victoria turned to Ethan Cole. She'd barely looked at the man in the 6 months he'd worked for her. He was just part of the landscape, someone Helen had hired to maintain the grounds, to keep the gardens immaculate, to remain invisible. Looking at him now, really looking, she saw a man in his early 30s with dark hair and darker eyes, wearing work clothes that had seen better days. His hands were calloused, his face weathered. There was a stillness about him, a kind of careful composure that reminded her of soldiers or chess players, people who thought 3 moves ahead. "Explain," she said. Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Your son is brilliant, Mrs. Hale. He understands complex concepts almost immediately once they're presented in the right way. I've been..." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Answering some questions for him. About science, mostly. Math. How things work." "You've been tutoring my son." "Informally, during lunch breaks sometimes. He's curious about everything, and his regular tutor doesn't, another pause, seem to engage that curiosity very effectively. Victoria felt her jaw tighten. Mr. Brennan is one of the most highly recommended educators in the state. I'm sure he is. Are you questioning his credentials? No, ma'am. I'm just saying that sometimes credentials don't matter as much as connection, and Christopher doesn't connect with Mr. Brennan's teaching style. The presumption of it. This groundskeeper, this man who pushed a lawnmower for a living, criticizing a tutor with a PhD from Columbia. And you think you know better? What exactly are your credentials, Mr. Cole? Something flickered across Ethan's face, so fast Victoria almost missed it. Pain, maybe, or anger. But when he spoke, his voice remained level. None that matter, apparently. Then perhaps you should stick to gardening. She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth, but pride kept her from taking them back. She was Victoria Hale. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She certainly didn't justify herself to employees. Ethan nodded once, already gathering the objects from the floor. The leaves, the stones, the paper shapes. Of course. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. He moved toward the door, and Victoria should have let him go. Should have ended this awkward encounter and retreated to her office where everything made sense, where power was quantifiable and control was absolute. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How long?" Ethan stopped. "Ma'am, how long have you been teaching my son?" A beat of silence. "About 3 months." 3 months, a quarter of a year, and she hadn't noticed. "Why?" Ethan turned back to face her. For the first time, she saw something other than careful neutrality in his expression, something that looked like sadness. "Because he asked me to." Yeah. Victoria didn't go to her office. She went to Christopher's room instead, stood outside his door for a full minute trying to decide what to say, then knocked gently. "Christopher, can I come in?" Silence. "Please, sweetheart, I just want to talk." More silence, then, "It's open." She found him sitting on his bed, staring out the window at the gardens below. He didn't look at her when she entered. Victoria sat down beside him, not too close, leaving space between them like the emotional chasm that had opened since Richard died. "I'm sorry I snapped at you," she said quietly. "I was surprised, that's all." Christopher said nothing. "How long have you been spending time with Mr. Cole?" Her son's shoulders hunched. "Are you going to fire him?" "What? No, because it's my fault. I'm the one who kept asking him questions. He told me I should ask my tutor instead, but Mr. Brennan just tells me to memorize things. He doesn't explain why they work." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. "What do you mean?" "Like with fractions. Mr. Brennan says just flip and multiply, but he never says why that works. When I ask why, he says it's the rule and I should just follow it." Christopher finally looked at her, and there was something desperate in his eyes. "But Mr. Cole shows me why. He makes it make sense. He makes me feel like I'm not—" He cut himself off. "Not what?" Victoria prompted gently. Christopher turned back to the window. "Stupid." The word hit Victoria like a physical blow. "You're not stupid. Christopher, you're incredibly bright. Then why can't I understand what Mr. Brennan teaches? Why does he keep saying I'm not applying myself? Why does he look at me like I'm disappointing him?" Victoria had no answer. She'd hired Brennan based on recommendations, on credentials, on his impressive resume. She'd trusted the same system that had served her well, that had built her empire. But systems didn't care about 9-year-old boys who'd lost their fathers. "What does Mr. Cole do differently?" she asked. For the first time in their conversation, something like hope flickered across Christopher's face. "He makes everything into a story. Like today, with the moon. He didn't just say the moon orbits Earth. He explained them the moon is falling, but it's moving so fast sideways that it keeps missing, and suddenly it made sense. I could see it in my head." Christopher turned to her, animated now in a way she hadn't seen in months. Last week, he explained negative numbers using temperature. He said, imagine you're climbing down a ladder into a frozen lake. 0 is the surface, and every rung below is colder. -3 isn't just -3. It's 3 rungs underwater where it's freezing. And then adding a negative number is like climbing down more rungs. And subtracting a negative is like climbing back up because you're taking away the cold. Victoria listened, watching her son's face transform as he talked. And he never makes me feel dumb for asking questions. Even when I ask the same thing 3 times, he just explains it different ways until one of them clicks. Christopher's voice dropped. Dad used to do that too. There it was. The real reason this mattered. Richard had been like that. Patient, creative, endlessly willing to explain things in new ways until understanding dawned. He'd spend hours helping Christopher with homework, turning math problems into games, making science experiments out of household objects. When Richard died, Christopher hadn't just lost his father, he'd lost his best teacher. Mom? Christopher's voice was small again. Can Mr. Cole keep teaching me? Please? I'll do all my regular lessons with Mr. Brennan too. I'll work twice as hard. I promise. Just please don't make him stop. Victoria looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw something she'd been too busy to notice before. He was desperate, not just for knowledge, but for connection, for someone who saw him as more than a problem to solve or a schedule to maintain. Let me think about it, she said finally. Christopher's face fell, but he nodded. Okay. Victoria stood to leave, then paused at the door. Christopher, when you're with Mr. Cole, do you feel happy? Her son didn't hesitate. Yes. That single word stayed with Victoria long after she left his room. She found Helen in the kitchen, overseeing dinner preparations with her usual efficient precision. Helen, can I ask you something? The housekeeper looked up from her clipboard. Of course, Mrs. Hale. Ethan Cole. What do you know about him? If Helen was surprised by the question, she didn't show it. He's been working here for 6 months. Excellent worker. Always punctual. Very thorough. The grounds have never looked better. Where did he come from? He answered an ad I placed online. He had references from a landscaping company in Oregon. Good ones. Did a trial day, impressed me immediately. Why do you ask? Victoria chose her words carefully. I found him with Christopher today, in Richard's study. Now Helen did look surprised. Oh, I've seen them talking occasionally. Mr. Cole eats his lunch on the South Terrace, and Christopher sometimes joins him. I assumed you knew. You didn't think to mention it? Helen's expression softened. Mrs. Hale, with respect, Christopher has been so withdrawn since Mr. Hale passed. These last few months, I've noticed him smiling more, engaging more. I thought it was good for him to have someone to talk to, even though that someone is a groundskeeper we barely know. Mr. Cole has been nothing but appropriate, and he clearly cares about Christopher's well-being. I've heard him encouraging the boy, building his confidence. Honestly, it's been lovely to see. Victoria felt a flicker of irritation. Or was it guilt? Why didn't anyone tell me? Helen met her gaze steadily. You've been very busy, ma'am, and Christopher seemed happy. I didn't want to interrupt that. The implication hung in the air. You've been too busy to notice your own son. Victoria left the kitchen without another word. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed in her enormous room, staring at the ceiling, turning the day over in her mind. Christopher's laughter, Ethan's calm explanation about orbits and gravity, her son's desperate plea, please don't make him stop. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went to her office. She pulled up Ethan Cole's employment file. Sparse, just the basics. Previous employment at a landscaping company in Portland. References that checked out. No criminal record. No red flags. No history before Portland, though. No college transcripts. No professional certifications. No digital footprint. For someone in the modern world, Ethan Cole barely existed. Victoria should have found that concerning. Instead, she found it intriguing. People didn't erase their pasts unless they had something to hide. But people also didn't teach complex physics to 9-year-olds for fun unless they had some kind of background in education. She opened her laptop and started digging deeper. An hour later, she'd found almost nothing. Ethan Cole had appeared in Portland 18 months ago with a 6-year-old son named Daniel. Before that, nothing. No social media presence, no news articles, no professional history. It was like he'd materialized out of thin air. Victoria sat back, drumming her fingers on the desk. She was good at reading people. It was how she'd built her empire, by knowing who to trust and who to crush. Ethan Cole didn't strike her as dangerous, but he was definitely hiding something. The question was, did it matter? Christopher was happy. For the first time since Richard's death, her son was engaged, curious, learning. Wasn't that what mattered most? But Victoria hadn't survived in a cutthroat industry by trusting easily. And she certainly hadn't built a $4 billion company by ignoring red flags. She needed more information. Quote, the next morning, Victoria did something she hadn't done in months. She cleared her schedule. Cancel everything, she told her assistant. Reschedule the calls, push the meetings. I'm working from home this week. All week, Mrs. Hale? All week. She spent the morning in her home office, actually working from home for once, instead of just saying she would. Through her window, she could see the gardens, and around 10:30 she saw Ethan Cole appear. He moved with economical precision, trimming hedges with practiced ease. There was something almost meditative about the way he worked, focused, present, unhurried. At noon, he sat down on the south terrace with a packed lunch. 10 minutes later, Christopher appeared. Victoria watched from her window as her son approached the groundskeeper. They talked. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read body language. Christopher animated, gesturing enthusiastically. Ethan listening, nodding, occasionally interjecting. Then Ethan pulled something from his pocket, looked like a piece of paper, and started folding it. Origami. Within minutes, he'd created what looked like a bird. He handed it to Christopher, then pulled out another sheet and began walking the boy through the folds. Christopher's face was pure concentration, his tongue poking out slightly as he worked. When he finished his own bird, slightly lopsided but recognizable, his smile was brilliant. Victoria's chest tightened. She grabbed her phone and called Helen. Where's Mr. Brennan today? He comes at 2, Mrs. Hale, same as every Tuesday. I want to observe the lesson. Observe? Discreetly. Is that possible? The tutoring happens in the library. There's a small alcove with a view of the main desk. You could watch from there without being seen. Perfect. Don't tell Christopher or Mr. Brennan I'll be there. At 2 o'clock, Victoria positioned herself in the alcove, hidden behind a shelf of Richard's old law books. Mr. Brennan arrived precisely on time, a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetually disapproving expression. He set up his materials at the library desk with meticulous care, arranging textbooks and worksheets in perfect alignment. Christopher arrived 2 minutes late, still wearing the smile from his origami lesson. You're late, Christopher, Brennan said without looking up. The smile evaporated. Sorry, Mr. Brennan. Punctuality is a sign of respect. When you're late, you're telling me your time is more valuable than mine. I said I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't change behavior. Let's begin. Take out your mathematics workbook. Victoria watched as Christopher pulled out his book, the enthusiasm from earlier completely gone. He looked small, defeated. We're on Chapter 7, Fractions. Did you complete the homework I assigned? Christopher slid a paper across the desk. Brennan examined it, his frown deepening. You got 12 out of 20 correct. That's a 60%, Christopher. Unacceptable. I tried. Trying isn't enough. You need to apply yourself. These concepts aren't difficult. You're simply not putting in the effort. Victoria felt her hands curl into fists. Let's review. Question 3. 3/4 divided by 1/2. What did you answer? 3/8? Wrong. The answer is 3/2, or 1.5. Don't you remember the rule? When dividing fractions, you flip the second fraction and multiply. But why do you flip it? Christopher asked quietly. Brennan looked up, irritated. Because that's how division of fractions works. But why does it work? Christopher, we don't have time to delve into the philosophical underpinnings of every mathematical operation. The rule is flip and multiply. If you'd simply memorize the rule and apply it consistently, you'd get these questions correct. But I don't understand why. Understanding comes with practice and repetition. You're overthinking this. Just follow the steps I've taught you. Victoria watched her son shrink further into his chair. The lesson continued for another 45 minutes. Brennan droned through explanations that were technically correct but utterly lifeless. He corrected Christopher's every mistake with increasing impatience. He assigned more homework, 2 pages worth, and reminded Christopher that his performance needs significant improvement. When it was finally over and Brennan had left, Christopher remained at the desk, staring at the homework with an expression of such defeat that Victoria felt her heart break. She emerged from the alcove. "Christopher!" He jumped, quickly wiping at his eyes. "Mom, I didn't know you were home." "I worked from home today." She sat down beside him. "How was your lesson?" "Fine." "Christopher." He looked at her, and there were tears on his lashes. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am. But I just don't get it. Mr. Brennan makes it sound so easy, and then I try to do it, and everything gets confused, and—" His voice broke. "Maybe I am stupid." "You're not stupid," Victoria said it fiercely, pulling him into her arms. "You're not stupid, sweetheart. You're brilliant. Then why can't I do fractions?" Victoria thought about what she'd witnessed, about Brennan's dismissive attitude, his refusal to explain concepts beyond rote memorization, his constant criticism. And she thought about what Christopher had described yesterday. Ethan making things make sense, explaining concepts in different ways until understanding clicked. She made a decision. "How about this?" she said. "Tomorrow, instead of homework, you and I are going to learn fractions together. And we're going to figure out why you flip and multiply, not just how." Christopher pulled back, hope and skepticism warring on his face. "You don't have time." "I'm making time." "But your work can wait." Victoria surprised herself with how much she meant it. "You're more important." For the first time in 18 months, Christopher hugged her. Really hugged her, not the perfunctory embrace of obligation, but the desperate clutch of a child who'd been holding everything inside for too long. Victoria held her son and wondered how she'd let it get this bad. How she'd been so focused on maintaining her empire, on keeping the company running, on proving she could do it all alone, that she'd missed what was happening right in front of her. She'd been so busy being strong that she'd forgotten to be present. When Christopher finally pulled away, she said, "I want you to do something for me." "What?" "Tomorrow, during your lunch with Mr. Cole, I want you to ask him to explain fractions to you. Ask him why you flip and multiply when you divide, and then I want you to come tell me what he says." Christopher's eyes widened. "You mean I can keep learning from him?" "For now. I'm still deciding what to do long term. But yes, you can keep talking to him." The smile that broke across her son's face was worth more than every dollar in her bank account. The next day, Victoria positioned herself in her office at 11:45, waiting. At noon, Ethan appeared on the terrace with his lunch. At 12:10, Christopher joined him. This time, Victoria opened her window slightly so she could hear. "Mr. Cole?" Christopher's voice drifted up. "Can I ask you about fractions?" "Of course. What about them?" "Why do you flip and multiply when you divide fractions?" "My tutor says that's just the rule, but I don't understand why it works." There was a pause, and Victoria could imagine Ethan considering how to answer. "Okay, so let's think about what division means first. If I say 8 divided by 2, what am I asking? How many 2's go into 8? Exactly. Division is asking how many groups of this fit into that. So 8 divided by 2 is asking how many groups of 2 fit into 8. And the answer is 4 groups. Make sense? Yeah. Now, let's say we have 6 cookies and we want to divide them among people, but we're giving each person half a cookie. 6 divided by 1/2. We're asking how many halves fit into 6 whole cookies. Victoria heard Christopher thinking. 12? Yes, because each cookie can be split into 2 halves, and 6 cookies times 2 halves each is 12 halves. So 6 divided by 1/2 equals 12. Okay. Now here's the cool part. When you flip 1/2, you get 2/1, which is just 2. And if you multiply 6 by 2, you get 12. Same answer. The flip and multiply rule works because dividing by a fraction is the same as asking how many of these fractional pieces fit into the whole. Oh, Christopher's voice held genuine wonder. So flipping it isn't just a random rule. It's actually showing the relationship between the pieces and the whole? Exactly. You're not just following a rule anymore. You understand what the rule represents. Silence for a moment, then, that's so cool. Why doesn't Mr. Brennan explain it like that? Different teachers have different styles. Mr. Brennan probably thinks memorizing rules is more efficient. But your way makes more sense. Well, different things work for different people. The important thing is that it makes sense to you now, right? Right. Thanks, Mr. Cole. Victoria closed the window and sat back in her chair. In 5 minutes, Ethan Cole had accomplished what Brennan couldn't in weeks. He hadn't just given Christopher the answer, he'd given him understanding. More than that, he'd given him confidence. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Helen, I need you to do something for me. I want comprehensive background checks run on both Mr. Brennan and Mr. Cole. Use the firm we use for executive hires, the thorough one. Mrs. Hale, we already did standard checks when we hired them. I want more than standard. I want everything. Education history, employment history, criminal records, credit reports, references beyond what they provided. Everything. May I ask why? Because I'm about to make a decision that requires I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The reports came back 3 days later. Mr. Brennan's file was exactly what she'd expected. Pristine credentials, impeccable resume, glowing references. On paper, he was perfect. Ethan Cole's file was concerning. The background check had hit walls everywhere. His employment history only went back 18 months. His references in Portland checked out, but there was nothing before that. No college transcripts, no professional licenses, no prior addresses. But there was one red flag that made Victoria's stomach drop. A sealed juvenile record from 20 years ago. The details were unavailable, but its existence suggested a past Ethan had tried to bury. And there were questions about his current situation. He was living in the guest cottage on the property with his son Daniel, a quiet 6-year-old who attended the local elementary school. No mention of the boy's mother. No explanation of where they'd come from or why. Victoria stared at the report for a long time. Every instinct she'd honed in business told her to be cautious. To distance her son from this man with a mysterious past and sealed records. To stick with the safe choice, the credentialed choice, the predictable choice. But those same instincts had led her to hire Brennan in the first place. And Brennan, for all his credentials, was making her son feel stupid, while Ethan Cole, for all his mysteries, was making her son feel brilliant. She thought about Christopher's laughter in the study, about the origami birds, about the way her son's face lit up when he finally understood fractions. She thought about the 18 months since Richard's death, months where she'd been so focused on holding everything together that she'd watched her son fall apart without really seeing it. And she made a decision that defied every business principle she'd ever learned. She was going to trust her gut instead of the data. That afternoon, Victoria requested a meeting with Ethan Cole. He appeared at her office at 4 o'clock, still in his work clothes, looking cautious. Mrs. Hale, you wanted to see me? Please, sit. He sat in the chair across from her desk, his posture relaxed but alert. Waiting. Victoria had rehearsed this conversation in her head a dozen different ways. Now, faced with the actual moment, she abandoned the script. I've been watching you with my son. Ethan's expression didn't change. I noticed. You knew I was watching. You're not particularly subtle, Mrs. Hale, and you have every right to watch. He's your son. Victoria almost smiled. I had background checks run on you. Now something flickered in Ethan's eyes, tension, maybe fear. And I have questions. I'm sure you do. Where did you come from, Mr. Cole? What were you doing before Portland? A long silence. Ethan looked past her, out the window at the gardens he maintained, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I was teaching. Victoria leaned forward. Teaching what? Science, physics mostly, some math, at a private school in Seattle. Why did you stop? The muscles in Ethan's jaw tightened. Because I made the mistake of trusting the wrong person. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm willing to give. He met her eyes. Mrs. Hale, I'm good at my job here. I maintain your property well. I stay out of the way. And I've never done anything to violate your trust. If you want to fire me because my past doesn't meet your standards, I understand. But I'm not going to discuss what happened in Seattle. There was pain in his voice. Old pain. The kind that comes from wounds that haven't fully healed. Victoria recognized it because she heard the same pain in her own voice sometimes. When people asked about Richard, she made a gamble. The background check showed a sealed juvenile record. Should I be concerned about that? Ethan's laugh was short and bitter. A juvenile record from when I was 15. I got caught graffiti tagging an underpass with some friends. We had to do community service and take an art class. Hardly criminal mastermind material. In Seattle? Is none of your business. He said it without hostility, just as a statement of fact. I'm sorry, but it's not. What happened there destroyed my career and nearly destroyed me. I'm not revisiting it for anyone. Victoria studied him. In her experience, people who refused to discuss their pasts usually had something terrible to hide. But Ethan didn't have the shifty-eyed desperation of someone concealing crimes. He had the weary resignation of someone who'd been hurt and learned not to trust. She understood that too. I'm going to fire Mr. Brennan, she said abruptly. Ethan blinked. What? My son's tutor. I'm letting him go, and I'd like you to take over Christopher's education. For the first time since Victoria had met him, Ethan Cole looked genuinely shocked. Mrs. Hale, I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? You're clearly better at it than Brennan. But I'm not certified. I don't have credentials anymore. I can't. You can teach my son. You've been doing it for 3 months. And in that time, he's learned more from you than he has in a year with Brennan. Victoria leaned back in her chair. I'm not asking you to run a formal school. I'm asking you to continue what you've been doing, making learning make sense to Christopher, helping him understand instead of memorize, making him feel capable instead of stupid. Ethan was shaking his head. You don't understand. If people find out who I am, what happened in Seattle, then we'll deal with it. But right now my son needs you, and I'm asking you to help him. Why? The question came out raw. Why would you trust me? You don't know me. You just said yourself the background check raised red flags. Victoria thought about her answer carefully. Because Christopher laughs when he's with you, she said finally. Because you make complex ideas simple without making him feel inferior. Because when I watch you with my son, I see the first glimpse of the boy he used to be before his father died. Her voice softened. And because sometimes the right person for a job isn't the one with the best resume. Sometimes it's just the one who cares enough to show up. Ethan looked down at his hands, calloused and dirt-stained from a day's work in the gardens. When he looked back up, there was moisture in his eyes. I can't be Christopher's official tutor, but I can keep helping him during lunches. After my work is done, informally. That's not enough. He needs structure, consistency. Mrs. Hale, what if I pay you as both groundskeeper and tutor, split duties? Mornings you work on the grounds, afternoons you work with Christopher. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. You're really serious about this? Completely. Even though you don't trust me? Victoria considered. I don't fully trust you, but I trust what I've seen. And right now, that's enough. She could see him wavering, wanting to say yes, but held back by whatever ghosts haunted him from Seattle. My son Daniel, Ethan said slowly. He'd be around sometimes. If I'm here more, I can't always leave him at school for aftercare. Bring him. Christopher could use a friend his own age. Daniel is 6. Christopher is 9. So Christopher could use a younger friend to teach things to. Kids learn best by teaching others. Ethan almost smiled. You've been reading about education theory. I've been reading everything I can find since this started. I may not be able to teach my son fractions, but I can at least understand how learning works. The almost smile became real. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less guarded. Okay, he said. I'll do it. But on one condition. What's that? If things from my past come back, and they might, you have to promise you'll think about Christopher first, not about defending me. If keeping me around puts him at risk in any way, I walk. No arguments. Victoria nodded. Agreed. They shook hands, and Victoria felt like she'd just made either the best decision of her life or the worst. Time would tell which. That evening, Victoria called Christopher into her office. I have news, she said. I've let Mr. Brennan go. Christopher's eyes went wide. You fired him? His teaching style wasn't working for you, so I've made other arrangements. What kind of arrangements? Starting next week, Mr. Cole will be your primary tutor. For a moment, Christopher just stared at her. Then his face split into the biggest smile she'd seen since before Richard died. Really? You mean it? I mean it. He'll work on the grounds in the mornings and teach you in the afternoons. We'll set up a proper schedule with lessons in math, science, literature, all the subjects you need. Christopher threw his arms around her. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Victoria held her son, feeling the fierce joy of his embrace, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. But for now, Christopher was happy, and that was enough. Part hãy lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Pha hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc, kể theo ngôi thứ ba, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document. Khi dần bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Show more 15 giờ 38 phút Part 2. A man hiding in plain sight. The new arrangement began the following Monday, and within a week the Hale estate had transformed in ways Victoria hadn't anticipated. She'd expected changes in Christopher's academic performance. What she hadn't expected was how the entire atmosphere of the house would shift. There was sound now, not just the hollow echo of footsteps on marble, but actual life. Christopher's voice asking questions, Ethan's patient responses, occasionally even laughter drifting through open windows. It unnerved her how quickly she'd grown accustomed to the silence, how she'd convinced herself that quiet was the same as peace, when really it had just been emptiness wearing a different name. By the second week, Daniel Cole had become a fixture in the house as well. The 6-year-old was quiet like his father, with the same dark hair and watchful eyes. But where Ethan's silence felt protective, Daniel's felt cautious, like a child who'd learned early that making noise could be dangerous. Victoria noticed the boy flinched at sudden movements. He apologized constantly, for things that didn't warrant apologies, for existing in spaces he had every right to occupy. When Helen offered him cookies in the kitchen, he asked 3 times if he was really allowed to take one. It bothered Victoria more than she wanted to admit. What had happened to make a 6-year-old so careful about taking up space in the world? She found herself watching Daniel the way she'd watched Ethan, trying to piece together a story from fragments, to understand what had broken in this little boy's life that left him so afraid of being too much. One afternoon, she walked past Richard's study. She still thought of it that way, even though it had become Christopher's classroom, and paused at the sound of Daniel's voice. I can't do it. The words were small, defeated. It's too hard. Hey. Ethan's voice was gentle. Remember what we talked about? There's no such thing as I can't. There's only I can't yet. Big difference. But Christopher can do it, and he's only 9. I'm stupid. Victoria's chest tightened. That word again. Stupid. Where did children learn to hate themselves so young? Listen to me, buddy. Ethan's tone had shifted, still gentle, but firmer now. You are not stupid. You're 6 years old. Christopher is 9. He's had 3 more years of practice than you. That's not about being smart or stupid. That's just about time. You understand? A sniffle. I guess. When I was 6, I couldn't tie my shoes. Took me until I was 7 to figure it out. Some kid in my class could do it at 4. Does that mean he was smarter than me? No. Right. It just means he learned it earlier. Everyone learns things at different speeds. The only thing that matters is that you keep trying. Can you do that for me? Okay. That's my guy. Now, let's look at this letter again. The B is tricky because it has 2 bumps instead of 1 like the D. See? Let's trace it together. Victoria moved away from the door, blinking against sudden moisture in her eyes. She'd hired Ethan to teach Christopher. She hadn't considered that he might be saving his own son at the same time. That evening, she made a decision. She knocked on the door of the guest cottage for the first time since Ethan had moved in 6 months ago. He answered, wearing faded jeans and a gray t-shirt, looking younger without the careful composure he maintained during working hours. Behind him, she could see Daniel at a small table, working intently on something with crayons. Mrs. Hale. Ethan looked surprised. Is everything all right? Did Christopher... Christopher's fine. I wanted to talk to you about Daniel. Tension flickered across Ethan's face. What about him? I'd like to enroll him in a better school. Ashford Academy has an excellent primary program. I know some of the board members. I could make a call. Ethan's expression closed off completely. We're fine where we are. The public school he attends doesn't have the resources. We're fine, Ethan repeated more firmly. I appreciate the offer, but no. Victoria had anticipated resistance. She'd prepared arguments about educational opportunity, about giving Daniel the best chance. But something in Ethan's eyes stopped her. Not just wariness, but fear. Why not? She asked quietly. Because fancy private schools keep records. They do background checks on families. They ask questions. Ethan's voice was tight. We need to stay off radar, Mrs. Hale. The less paperwork, the less scrutiny, the better. Off radar from what? Ethan glanced back at Daniel, then stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. From people who might try to take him from me. Victoria felt ice slide down her spine. What people? I can't tell you that. Ethan, please. His voice cracked on the word. Daniel is all I have left. I know you mean well, but drawing attention to us is the last thing we need. We're safe here, anonymous here. Let us stay that way. Victoria looked at this man who'd somehow become essential to her son's happiness and saw desperation she recognized. After Richard died, she'd felt that same primal terror that somehow someone might take Christopher too. That grief might come back and claim the one precious thing she had left. All right, she said. No Ashford. But if you change your mind, I won't. But thank you. She turned to leave, then paused. Ethan, I heard you earlier, with Daniel, telling him about I can't yet. Ethan's shoulders tensed. I didn't realize you were listening. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but what you said about everyone learning at different speeds, that was good, really good. I meant it. I know, that's why it was good. Victoria met his eyes. He's lucky to have you. Ethan's laugh was hollow. Some days I wonder if he'd be better off with someone else, someone who hasn't made such a mess of things. Christopher thinks you hung the moon, and from what I've seen, Daniel does too. Christopher doesn't know the whole story. Maybe the whole story doesn't matter as much as what you're doing right now. Victoria left before Ethan could respond, but she felt his eyes on her back all the way to the main house. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Mornings, Ethan worked the grounds while Christopher did independent reading. Afternoons, they moved into the study for lessons that bore no resemblance to the rigid structure Brennan had imposed. Victoria made excuses to work from home more often. She told herself it was to monitor the situation, to ensure her gamble was paying off. But really, she just wanted to witness the transformation happening under her own roof. One Thursday, she found them in the study with every surface covered in household objects. Spoons, cups, rubber bands, books, a basketball, even one of Christopher's shoes. What's all this? She asked from the doorway. Christopher looked up, eyes bright with excitement. We're learning about density. Mr. Cole filled the bathtub and we're testing which things float and which ones sink. You filled my bathtub? Ethan had the grace to look slightly sheepish. The kitchen sink wasn't big enough. I'll clean everything up, I promise. Look, Mom. Christopher held up a piece of paper covered in observations. We thought the shoe would sink because it's heavy, but it floated. And the spoon sank even though it's lighter. Mr. Cole says it's about how tightly packed the molecules are, not just about weight. And once we finish testing everything, Ethan added, we're going to graph the results and look for patterns. Victoria watched her son explain density and buoyancy with the kind of enthusiasm most 9-year-olds reserve for video games or candy. When had learning become fun for him? When had curiosity replaced anxiety? Just promise me you'll drain the tub when you're done, she said. Cross my heart, Ethan replied, and there was something in his smile, warm and unguarded, that made Victoria's breath catch for just a moment. She retreated to her office, telling herself the flutter in her chest was just satisfaction at seeing her investment pay off. Nothing more. But that night, alone in her enormous bedroom, she found herself thinking about that smile, about the way Ethan's whole face changed when he was teaching, like he became a different person, lighter, freer, more himself. She wondered what had happened in Seattle to drive that version of him underground. What betrayal could be so complete that a man would give up his career, his identity, everything he'd built, just to protect his son? The question haunted her enough that she did something she knew she shouldn't. She called a private investigator, not the corporate firm that had done the background check, but someone discreet, someone who specialized in finding information people wanted buried. "I need you to look into someone's past," she told him, "but I need you to be careful. If there's any chance your investigation could tip off whoever he's hiding from, I need you to stop." "Understood. What's the name?" "Ethan Cole. He was teaching at a private school in Seattle about 18 months ago. Something happened that ended his career. I need to know what." "I'll see what I can find." Victoria hung up, feeling guilty and justified in equal measure. She was protecting her son. She needed to know who was in her house, who was shaping Christopher's mind 6 hours a day. This was due diligence, nothing more. The investigator called back 3 days later. "Mrs. Hale, I found something, but you're not going to like it." Victoria closed her office door. "Tell me." Ethan Cole, his real name, by the way, not an alias, was a science teacher at Westridge Academy, an elite private school in Seattle. By all accounts, he was exceptional. Students loved him. Parents requested him specifically. He'd been there 5 years, had just won a teaching award. So what happened? He developed a revolutionary teaching methodology, something about using interactive technology and adaptive learning algorithms to personalize education for each student. He spent 3 years developing it, testing it with his classes. The results were remarkable. Students who'd been struggling suddenly thrived. Standardized test scores went up across the board. Victoria felt dread building in her stomach. And he made the mistake of sharing his work with the head of the science department, a Dr. Marcus Reed. Cole trusted Reed, saw him as a mentor. He gave Reed access to all his research, all his data, thinking they might collaborate or publish together. Reed stole it. Worse, Reed claimed he'd developed the methodology himself. Said Cole was a junior teacher who'd merely assisted with implementation. Reed had connections, prestige, years of published research. Cole was relatively unknown. When Cole tried to fight back, to prove the work was his, Reed accused him of plagiarism, of trying to steal credit for work that wasn't his. Victoria's hands tightened on the phone. How did Reed get away with it? Carefully. Reed had been meticulous. He'd documented everything in a way that made it look like his ideas, his research, with Cole as a research assistant. He had emails, meeting notes, all carefully crafted to establish himself as the originator. And he had institutional power. The school administration sided with him. They fired Cole, blacklisted him from other private schools in the region. Reed published the research under his own name, won awards, got a position at a prestigious university. And Ethan? Couldn't get another teaching job. His reputation was destroyed. Every time he applied somewhere, Reed's accusations followed him. Professional references dried up. The education community is small. Word spread fast. He was branded as someone who'd tried to steal his mentor's work, as someone untrustworthy. Victoria felt sick. There has to be evidence. Something to prove Ethan was telling the truth. There probably is, but Cole never fought it legally. About 8 months into the nightmare, his wife left him. Took most of their savings in the divorce, said she couldn't handle being married to someone so publicly disgraced. She didn't want custody of their son. She was already involved with someone else, starting a new life. Cole was left with Daniel, no job, no money, and a reputation in ruins. So he disappeared. Smart move, really. He changed locations, took a job that didn't require references or credentials, kept his head down. I'm guessing he's been saving money, trying to rebuild some kind of life where no one knows about Seattle. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. This Dr. Reed, is he still at the university? Thriving, just got another grant to expand the work. The work he stole. He's considered a pioneer in educational technology now. Send me everything you found, every detail. Mrs. Hale, if you're thinking about exposing Reed, you should know. He has powerful allies. Taking him on wouldn't be easy. Well, I'm not thinking anything yet. I just want the information. After she hung up, Victoria sat in her office for over an hour, staring at nothing. She thought about Ethan teaching Christopher with such patience and joy, never showing the bitterness he must feel. She thought about the way he encouraged Daniel, building his son's confidence even while his own had been destroyed. She thought about a man who'd lost everything, his career, his wife, his reputation, and still found the strength to keep going, to keep teaching, to keep being kind. And she thought about Marcus Reed, who'd built a career on stolen work while the man who actually deserved the credit pushed a lawnmower and hid from the world. It wasn't right. None of it was right. But what could she do? She had no standing in this. It wasn't her fight, except it was starting to feel like it might be. The next afternoon, Victoria found Ethan on the South Terrace during his lunch break. He was alone for once. Christopher was at a dentist appointment, and Daniel was at school. "Can I join you?" she asked. Ethan looked surprised, but nodded, gesturing to the bench beside him. "Of course." They sat in silence for a moment. Below them, the garden stretched out in geometric perfection, every hedge trimmed, every flower bed immaculate. "You do beautiful work," Victoria said. "With the grounds, I mean." "Thank you. It's peaceful, meditative, very different from teaching, but there's satisfaction in it." "Do you miss it? Teaching in a real classroom?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Every day." "Then why not try again? Maybe in a different state, where Reed's reach doesn't extend. It's not that simple." Ethan turned to face her. "Mrs. Hale, I know you mean well, but you don't understand. It's not just about getting another job. It's about protecting Daniel. If I surface anywhere in education, Reed will find out. And if he finds out, he'll go after me again, harder this time, because he'll see me as a threat. Someone who might finally expose him. What could he do? You're not even in the same state anymore." "He could press charges. False ones, but charges nonetheless. He's done it before, threatened legal action against people who questioned his work. He has lawyers, resources, institutional backing. I have nothing." Ethan's voice was raw. "And if he drags me into court, if there's a custody evaluation, if Daniel's life gets turned upside down because his father is fighting legal battles, I can't risk it. I won't." "So you're just going to hide forever?" "If that's what it takes to keep my son safe, yes." Victoria understood that sentiment viscerally. She'd have done the same for Christopher. Hell, she'd built her entire life around keeping him safe, even if she'd lost sight of what safety really meant. "What if there was a way to fight back without risking Daniel?" she asked quietly. Ethan laughed bitterly. "There isn't." "What if I helped?" He turned to her, confusion clear on his face. "What?" "I have resources. Lawyers, money, influence. What if—" "No." Ethan stood abruptly. "Absolutely not. Mrs. Hale, I appreciate everything you've done for me and Daniel, giving me this job, letting me teach Christopher. But this isn't your battle, and getting involved would only put you at risk too. I'm not afraid of Marcus Reed. You should be. He's ruthless, and he's connected. He doesn't fight fair." Victoria stood as well, meeting Ethan's eyes. "Neither do I." They faced each other in the afternoon sunlight, and Victoria saw the exact moment Ethan recognized what she was offering. Not just help, but alliance. A willingness to step into his fight because it had become personal to her too. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this?" Victoria thought about her answer carefully. Because Christopher was happy? Because Ethan deserved justice? Because she was tired of watching good people suffer while predators thrived? All of those were true. But there was something else. Something she was just beginning to acknowledge to herself. "Because I'm starting to understand what was taken from you," she said. "And it wasn't just a job or a methodology. It was your purpose, your identity, the thing that made you who you are." She paused. "Richard used to say that the cruelest thing you can do to someone is convince them their gifts don't matter. That's what Reed did to you, and I can't stand watching you accept that lie." Ethan's eyes were bright with emotion. "You didn't know Richard." "No, but Christopher talks about him, about how his father could fix anything, solve any problem, how he never gave up when something mattered." Victoria smiled sadly. "I think Richard would have liked you. I think he would have wanted someone like you teaching his son." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning Victoria hadn't intended to speak aloud. Ethan looked away, his throat working. I can't let you risk your reputation for me. My reputation is built on taking calculated risks. Let me decide which ones are worth it. And if it backfires? If Reed comes after you too? Then I'll deal with it. I've faced hostile takeovers and corporate espionage. I think I can handle one corrupt academic. Ethan shook his head, but Victoria could see him wavering. Hope was a dangerous thing. It made people want to believe in impossible solutions. Just think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. Think about whether you want to spend the rest of your life hiding or whether you want to fight back. She left him there on the terrace, and when she glanced back from the doorway, he was staring at his hands, those capable hands that had built educational programs and trimmed hedges and taught children to understand the world, hands that deserved better than a life in the shadows. That evening, Christopher came to her office with a question about history homework. They worked through it together, and Victoria was struck by how much she'd learned about teaching in the past few weeks, just from watching Ethan. How to ask questions that led to understanding rather than just answers. How to be patient when confusion lingered. How to celebrate small victories. "Mom?" Christopher asked as he gathered his books. "Is Mr. Cole okay?" "What do you mean?" "He seemed sad today, during our lesson, like he was somewhere else in his head." Victoria's heart squeezed. Her 9-year-old son had learned to read emotional nuance, to notice when someone was hurting. When had that happened? "He's just dealing with some difficult things from his past," she said carefully. "Like how you're dealing with Dad being gone." The question caught her off guard. "Similar, yes." Christopher nodded thoughtfully. "Daniel says his mom left, that she didn't want them anymore." "Daniel told you that?" "Not exactly. He said she wanted a better family." "But I think that's the same thing." Victoria pulled her son close. "Sweetheart, sometimes adults make terrible decisions. That's not a reflection on the children they leave behind." "I know. That's what I told Daniel." Christopher pulled back to look at her. "I told him he's lucky to have Mr. Cole, because Mr. Cole is the kind of dad who stays, even when things are hard." Out of the mouths of children, Victoria thought. 9 years old and already understanding loyalty better than most adults. "You're right," she said. "Mr. Cole is exactly that kind of dad." "Like how Dad was." "Like how Dad was," Victoria agreed, her throat tight. After Christopher left, Victoria opened her laptop and began researching. Marcus Reed, Ph.D., Professor of Educational Technology at Cascade University. She found his faculty page, his published papers, his accolades. She watched a TED Talk where he presented his methodology with polished confidence, never once mentioning Ethan Cole. And she began to formulate a plan. 3 days later, she received a call that changed everything. "Mrs. Hale," Helen's voice was strained. "There's someone here to see Mr. Cole. She says she's his ex-wife." Victoria's blood ran cold. "Where is she?" "In the front sitting room. I didn't know what to tell her." "Where's Ethan?" "In the study with Christopher." "Should I?" "No. I'll handle this. Don't tell Ethan yet. I want to know what she wants first." Victoria descended the stairs with her corporate armor firmly in place. Whoever this woman was, whatever she wanted, she'd have to go through Victoria first. The woman in the sitting room was beautiful in a calculated way. Blonde highlights, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. She looked up when Victoria entered, her expression cool and appraising. "Mrs. Hale, I presume? I'm Jennifer Cole. I'm here to see my husband." "Ex-husband," Victoria corrected. "And he's working. What is this about?" Jennifer's smile didn't reach her eyes. "That's between Ethan and me. But since you seem to have appointed yourself his guardian, I'll tell you, I'm here about our son." Every protective instinct Victoria possessed flared to life. "Daniel!" "Yes, I've been thinking about the custody arrangement. I gave Ethan full custody during the divorce because I wasn't in a position to care for a child then. But circumstances have changed. My new husband and I are settled now. We have resources, stability. I think Daniel would be better off with us." Victoria kept her expression neutral despite the fury building in her chest. "After 18 months of no contact, you suddenly want custody. I've been busy building a new life. But I'm his mother. I have rights." "You have the rights you signed away in the divorce." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "My lawyer says we can revisit that. especially given Ethan's current circumstances, living in a guest cottage, working as a groundskeeper, teaching other people's children while our son attends substandard public school. She looked around the opulent room. I can offer Daniel so much more. You can offer him money. That's not the same as being a parent. And what would you know about it? You're a billionaire who hired a groundskeeper to raise her own son because she's too busy running an empire. The words hit harder because there was truth in them. Victoria had been too busy. She had outsourced Christopher's care to others, but she was learning, changing, trying to be better. I think you should leave, Victoria said quietly. I'll leave after I see Ethan. I have legal papers I need him to sign. What kind of papers? Agreeing to a custody reevaluation. If he refuses, we'll go to court. But court is expensive, time-consuming, and public. I'm giving him a chance to settle this quietly. It was a threat, pure and simple. Sign over custody or face a legal battle Ethan couldn't afford. Victoria was about to respond when Ethan appeared in the doorway, Daniel's small hand clutched in his. His face had gone white. Jennifer. His voice was flat. What are you doing here? Hello, Ethan. I came to discuss our son's future. Ethan's grip on Daniel's hand tightened. The boy pressed closer to his father, eyes wide with confusion and fear. We don't have anything to discuss. You gave up custody. You chose to leave. And now I'm choosing to come back. I made a mistake, Ethan. I want to fix it. By taking our son? Ethan's voice shook with suppressed rage. You don't get to do that. You don't get to walk away and then walk back in when it's convenient. Jennifer's expression hardened. I spoke with Marcus Reed last week. He told me about your little setup here. Teaching again. Getting comfortable. Playing house with billionaires. She glanced at Victoria. Marcus thinks it's only a matter of time before you try to resurface in education properly. And when you do, he'll be ready. He has documentation of everything. Your plagiarism, your instability, your inability to hold a job. Those are lies, and you know it. Do I? Because from where I'm standing, you're exactly where liars end up, hiding in the shadows, too afraid to use your own name in your real profession. Jennifer turned to Daniel, her voice softening artificially. Hi, baby. Do you remember Mommy? Daniel pressed harder against Ethan's leg, silent. He doesn't know you, Ethan said, because you abandoned him. Which is exactly why I need to rebuild our relationship, and I can do that better if he lives with me. My lawyers will be filing the petition next week. You'll be served shortly. Jennifer pulled an envelope from her purse. Or you can sign these papers now, agree to shared custody, and we can avoid the whole mess. Ethan didn't take the envelope. Get out. I'm offering you a compromise. Get out! Victoria had never heard Ethan raise his voice before. The sound filled the room like thunder, and Daniel started crying. Jennifer's mask of civility cracked. Fine. We'll do this the hard way. But you should know, Marcus is willing to testify about your character, about how you stole his work, destroyed your own career, made it impossible for your wife to stay with you. No judge is going to give you full custody after hearing that. She walked past Ethan without another glance at Daniel, who was sobbing into his father's leg. Victoria followed her to the door. Mrs. Cole? Jennifer turned. Yes? You made a mistake coming here. You should have stayed gone. Is that a threat? It's a promise. If you try to take that child from his father, you'll find out exactly what I'm capable of. And trust me, it's more than you want to deal with. Jennifer laughed. The billionaire playing white knight. How noble. But money doesn't win custody cases, Mrs. Hale. Stability does. Morality does. And Ethan has neither. She left, and Victoria stood at the door for a long moment, hands clenched into fists. When she turned back, Ethan was on the floor, holding Daniel while the boy cried. He looked up at Victoria, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Defeat. I have to disappear again, he said. Take Daniel and run before she can file anything. Running won't solve this. It'll buy time. I can't fight her and read both. I don't have the resources. But I do. Ethan shook his head. You don't understand what you're up against. Then explain it to me. Victoria crouched down to their level. Tell me everything. About Reed, about Jennifer, about Seattle, all of it. And then let me help you fight back. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do this for us? Victoria looked at Daniel's tear-stained face, at Ethan's desperate eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't about Christopher's education anymore. This wasn't about hiring the right tutor or making smart business decisions. This was about a 6-year-old boy who deserved to stay with the parent who actually loved him. About a good man who'd been destroyed by someone else's greed and corruption. About standing up when standing up mattered, even when it was hard. Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. And because I'm tired of watching bad people win. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, and she watched him make the hardest decision of his life, to trust someone again, despite everything that had happened the last time he'd trusted. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll tell you everything. Part 3. Louis. Viết 6.500 từ liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Pha hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phủ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chi dần bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Show more 15-43 Part 3. Secrets Uncovered, Threats Return. That evening, after Daniel had finally cried himself to sleep in Ethan's arms and been carried to bed, Victoria and Ethan sat across from each other in her private office. The house was quiet around them, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not empty, but tense. Waiting. Ethan looked exhausted, his shoulders bowed under invisible weight. He held a cup of coffee Helen had brought, but he hadn't touched it, just stared into it like he might find answers in the dark liquid. Start at the beginning, Victoria said gently. Seattle, the methodology you developed. Ethan drew a long breath and began to speak. It started 5 years ago when I first got to Westridge Academy. I'd been teaching for a few years before that, but Westridge was different. Elite, well-funded, full of brilliant students. But I noticed something. Even the smart kids struggled with certain concepts. Not because they weren't capable, but because the way we taught didn't match how their brains worked. He finally took a sip of coffee, grimaced at how cold it had gotten. I started experimenting, different teaching methods for different students. Visual learners got diagrams and videos. Kinesthetic learners got hands-on experiments. Abstract thinkers got theoretical frameworks. And the more I adapted to each student, the better they performed. Well, that's not exactly revolutionary, Victoria said. Differentiated instruction has been around for decades. You're right. But I took it further. I started tracking everything. What methods worked for which students, what learning patterns emerged, how students responded to different types of feedback. I built a database, started seeing patterns I hadn't expected. And I realized something. If I could create an adaptive system, something that learned from each interaction and adjusted in real time, I could personalize education in a way that had never been done before. Despite everything, Ethan's eyes lit up as he talked. This was his passion, Victoria realized. The thing that made him come alive. I spent 3 years developing it. Nights, weekends, summers. I created software that could assess a student's learning style, track their progress, identify exactly where they were struggling, and adapt the curriculum accordingly. It wasn't AI in the modern sense, but it was smart, responsive, and it worked. How well? Students who'd been getting C's were suddenly getting A's. Kids who'd hated science were begging for extra assignments. Parents were calling the school asking what miracle had happened to their children. Ethan's voice grew thick. It was everything I'd dreamed of, proof that with the right approach, every student could excel. That there were no stupid kids, just kids who hadn't found their optimal learning path yet. And you shared this with Marcus Reed. The light in Ethan's eyes died. Yeah. Marcus was head of the science department, had been at Westridge for 15 years. Published author, respected researcher. I looked up to him. Thought he was a mentor. His laugh was bitter. I was so naive. I actually believed he wanted to help me refine the methodology. Maybe co-author a paper. I gave him everything. Source code, student data, research notes, complete access. When did you realize something was wrong? About 6 months later. I'd been working with Marcus to prepare for publication. We were supposed to present together at a major education conference. Then one day I got an email from the conference organizers. They said they'd received my submission, except it listed Marcus as sole author and me as a research assistant who'd helped with data collection. Victoria felt anger coil in her chest. What did you do? I confronted him, walked into his office with printouts of the email, demanded to know what was going on. And Marcus just looked at me with this calm, cold expression and said, Ethan, you misunderstood our arrangement. This was always my project. You were helping me implement my ideas. But you had proof it was yours. That's what I thought. Except when I went back through our emails, our meeting notes, everything we documented, it was all framed as his project. Every email started with him outlining ideas and me responding. Every meeting note had him as the lead researcher. He'd been building a paper trail from day one, making it look like I was just assisting with his vision. Ethan's hands were shaking now. Victoria wanted to reach across and take them, but she stayed still, letting him tell the story his way. I tried to fight it. Went to the headmaster, showed him my original research notes, my early prototypes. But Marcus had more. He had polished documentation, professional presentations, a narrative that made sense. And he had 15 years of credibility at Westridge. I had 5. Who were they going to believe? They fired you. Not at first. At first, they just said I should let it go. That the important thing was the methodology worked, not who got credit. But I couldn't let it go. I kept pushing, kept demanding they investigate. And that's when Marcus escalated. He filed a formal complaint accusing me of plagiarism, of academic dishonesty, of trying to steal his research and pass it off as my own. Victoria's jaw tightened. He weaponized the system against you. Exactly. And once those accusations were formal, once they were in my file, I was toxic. The school had to act. They put me on leave pending investigation. And during that investigation, Marcus just kept producing more evidence. Emails I didn't remember writing, meeting notes that contradicted my memory. I started questioning myself, wondering if I was going crazy. He forged evidence. Probably, or just selectively edited what was real. Either way, by the time the investigation concluded, the narrative was set. I was an unstable junior teacher who'd become obsessed with my mentor's work and convinced myself I'd created it. The school let me go, quietly, with a settlement that included a non-disclosure agreement. They paid me enough to make the problem go away, but not enough to fight back. Victoria's mind was already working, analyzing. But you didn't sign the NDA. Ethan shook his head. I was going to. Jennifer was pushing me to take the money and move on. But then I saw Marcus present at the conference, watched him accept awards for work I'd done, heard him talk about his breakthrough in educational technology, and I couldn't do it. I refused to sign, refused to take the money, refused to stay quiet. So he destroyed you. Systematically. First, he made sure every school in the Seattle area knew I was problematic. References dried up. Interviews got canceled. Then he started spreading rumors in the wider education community that I was unstable, that I'd had a breakdown, that I'd made threats. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. Reputation is everything in teaching. Once yours is damaged, you're done. And Jennifer left during all this. Pain flashed across Ethan's face. She tried to stick it out. I'll give her that. But watching me fall apart, watching our savings evaporate on legal consultations that went nowhere, watching me become bitter and angry, it was too much. She met someone else, someone stable, successful, unmarred by scandal. And she made a choice. She chose herself over her family. She chose survival. I can't entirely blame her. By that point, I was barely functional, depressed, paranoid, convinced everyone was against me. I wasn't a good husband. Probably wasn't a great father either. But you kept Daniel. She didn't want him. Said he deserved better than what we could offer. Better than a father with a destroyed career and a mother who was already moving on. The divorce lawyer drew up papers giving me full custody. Jennifer signed without hesitation. I think she saw Daniel as part of the life she was leaving behind. Victoria's throat was tight. How did you end up here? I sold everything we had left, packed what fit in my car, and drove. Just drove until I felt far enough away from Seattle, from Marcus, from all of it. Ended up in Portland first, worked manual labor for a while. Landscaping, mostly. I'd always been good with my hands, and it was work that didn't require references or background checks. Nobody cared who I used to be. And you were good at it. Good enough? When I saw Helen's ad for a groundskeeper position, I applied. She hired me, gave us the cottage, didn't ask too many questions. It was the first stability Daniel and I had in months. I thought we were safe here. Hidden. That if I kept my head down, stayed away from anything education-related, Marcus would forget about me. But you couldn't stay away from teaching. Ethan's smile was sad. No, it's who I am. When I saw Christopher struggling, when I heard him call himself stupid, I recognized that pain. I'd seen it in too many students over the years, and I couldn't just walk away. So I started small. Lunch conversations, answering questions, explaining things in ways that made sense to him. And he flourished. He did. And for a while I thought maybe I could have this. A small, quiet way to keep doing what I loved without drawing attention. But I should have known better. Jennifer finding me, bringing Marcus back into the picture, it was inevitable. People like Marcus don't forget. They can't afford to. Because if I ever get my voice back, if I ever prove what he did, his entire career collapses. Victoria leaned forward. Then let's prove it. You don't understand. Marcus has spent 18 months building on the stolen methodology. He's published papers, won grants, built a reputation as an innovator. He has institutional backing from a major university. Taking him down means going up against all of that. I've gone up against bigger. This isn't a corporate merger, Victoria. This is academic politics, and it's vicious. People protect their own. Even if we could prove Marcus stole the methodology, the university would circle the wagons. They've invested too much in his reputation to admit they backed a fraud. Victoria stood, pacing to the window. Outside, the gardens were dark except for small solar lights marking the paths. Somewhere out there was the cottage where Daniel slept, a 6-year-old boy caught in adult battles he didn't understand. Tell me about Jennifer, she said. Why come back now? Why seek custody after all this time? Money. It's always money with her. I did some digging after she left today. Her new husband's business is struggling. She's living beyond her means. Child support payments would help, but full custody would give her access to benefits, tax advantages. And if she could prove I'm an unfit parent, she could go after the settlement money from your divorce. What little is left of it. Most of it went to keeping us afloat this past year, but there's still some in trust for Daniel's future. Jennifer knows that. Victoria turned back to face him. So this isn't about Daniel at all? It's about what he represents financially. For Jennifer, yes. For Marcus, it's about eliminating a threat. If Jennifer wins custody, I lose credibility. What judge would listen to plagiarism accusations from a man who couldn't even keep custody of his own son? Marcus probably coached her, might even be funding her legal fees. That's quite a conspiracy. It's not paranoia if they're actually out to get you. Ethan's voice was hollow. I've been running from this for 18 months, Victoria. Part of me is exhausted. Part of me just wants to disappear again, find somewhere even more remote, start over with a new name. And abandon Christopher? Abandon the work you've been doing here? I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. Victoria sat back down, her voice firm. You can run, yes. Take Daniel and disappear. Spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, moving every time someone gets too close to the truth. Never teach again. Never use your real name. Never let your son have a stable home. Or you can fight. Let me help you build a case against Marcus Reed that's so airtight, even institutional politics can't protect him. Let me hire lawyers who can destroy Jennifer's custody claim before it ever sees a courtroom. Let me use my resources, the same ones that built a $4 billion company, to give you back what was stolen. Ethan stared at her. Why would you do that? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're a brilliant teacher who loves his son. I know you were wronged by someone who should have been your mentor. I know my son has learned more from you in 2 months than he learned in a year with a credentialed tutor. Victoria paused. And I know what it's like to lose something precious and feel powerless to get it back. This isn't the same as losing your husband. No, but the helplessness is. After Richard died, I threw myself into work because it was something I could control. I couldn't control death or grief, but I could control quarterly earnings and market share. I built an empire on the illusion of control. Her voice softened. And in the process, I almost lost my son. Christopher was drowning right in front of me, and I was too busy maintaining control to notice. You noticed eventually. Because of you. Because you saw what I was too blind to see. That Christopher needed someone to care more about his understanding than his performance. Someone to make him feel capable instead of deficient. Victoria met Ethan's eyes. You gave me my son back. Let me help you keep yours. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and risk. Finally, Ethan spoke. If we do this, if we actually go after Marcus, it's going to get ugly. He'll fight back. He'll dig into your life, looking for leverage. He'll try to paint you as some delusional billionaire with a savior complex, or worse, he'll imply there's something inappropriate about our relationship. Let him try. I've faced hostile press before. And Jennifer will use it in court. She'll say you're manipulating me, that I'm not thinking clearly, that I'm an unfit parent being controlled by a wealthy benefactor. Your lawyers will counter that I'm simply providing resources to someone who was wronged. There's nothing illegal about that. But there might be something illegal about what I need you to do. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Explain. Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolled through old files. When I first started developing the methodology, I kept everything on a personal server. Notes, code, student data, everything. Marcus didn't know about it. I had redundancy systems because I'd lost work to computer crashes before. When everything fell apart, I grabbed the physical hard drives before the school could confiscate my computer. I have originals of everything, with timestamps that predate Marcus's work by years. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. Except I probably violated the school's technology policy by keeping that data. And some of it includes student information, which might be protected. A good lawyer could argue I stole proprietary information from Westridge. Victoria smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Then we'll need better lawyers. Ones who can argue that you were protecting your own intellectual property, and that any technology policy violations are meaningless compared to academic fraud. You really think we can win this? I think we have to try, because the alternative is letting corrupt people succeed, and I'm done watching that happen. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. Okay, let's do it. Let's take down Marcus Reed. Victoria shook his hand, feeling the calluses from months of groundskeeping, the strength in his grip. First thing tomorrow, I'm calling my legal team. We're going to need specialists, education law, custody law, intellectual property, and we're going to need investigators who can dig into Marcus's career, find every inconsistency, every moment where his story doesn't match reality. That's going to cost a fortune. I have a fortune. Might as well use it for something that matters. They worked until nearly midnight, Victoria taking notes as Ethan outlined everything he remembered about the methodology's development, the timeline of events in Seattle, the evidence he'd saved. By the time they finished, Victoria had pages of details and a preliminary strategy. As Ethan stood to leave, he paused at the door. Victoria, thank you for believing me. I'd forgotten what that felt like. She wanted to say something profound, something that would ease the pain she saw in his eyes. Instead, she just said, get some sleep. Tomorrow, we start fighting back. After he left, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at her notes. She was about to go to war against a university-backed professor and a vindictive ex-wife. It was going to be expensive, messy, and possibly futile. But when she thought about Daniel's tear-stained face, about Ethan's years of suffering in silence, about Christopher finally learning to love learning again, she knew it was the right choice. Some battles were worth fighting even when victory wasn't guaranteed. The next morning, Victoria assembled a team. Her head corporate counsel, Michael Chen, arrived first, skeptical about the whole endeavor until she explained the full situation. Then his expression shifted from doubt to determination. Academic fraud cases are tricky, he said, reviewing Ethan's evidence. But if we can establish a clear timeline showing Cole developed this methodology years before Reed claimed it, we have a foundation. The question is whether we can get anyone at Westridge or Cascade University to cooperate. They won't, Victoria said. They'll protect their own. We need to go around them. How? Public pressure. If we can get the media interested, if we can show this isn't just a he said dispute, but a clear case of theft with documented evidence, the universities will have to respond. Michael nodded slowly. It's risky. Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. And Reed will come after you hard. I'm counting on it. Let him show his true colors. Next came Sarah Walsh, a family law specialist with a reputation for destroying bad parents in custody battles. She listened to the situation with Jennifer, her expression growing colder with each detail. This is one of the nastiest custody grabs I've seen, Sarah said bluntly. But it's also one of the most defensible. Father has been primary caregiver for 18 months, mother abandoned the child, and her sudden interest coincides with financial difficulties. We can tear this apart. How fast? Victoria asked. Depends on when she files. If she's smart, she'll wait, build a case first. If she's desperate, she'll file immediately and we'll crush her in the initial hearing. Assume she's desperate but well coached. Then we prepare for a fight. I'll need to interview Daniel, gently, age-appropriately, to document the father-son relationship. I'll need character witnesses, documentation of Ethan's parenting, evidence of Jennifer's abandonment. Can you provide that? All of it. Helen can testify to Ethan's character and his care of Daniel. I can speak to his work here, his teaching ability. Christopher, Victoria paused. Christopher would probably testify too, if needed. He adores Ethan. Sarah made notes. Good. We'll build a picture of a dedicated father doing everything right versus a mother who walked away and only came back when it was convenient. Judges hate that. The third member of the team was someone Victoria had worked with before, Patricia Eng, a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage and academic fraud. If anyone could find dirt on Marcus Reed, it was Patricia. I need everything, Victoria told her. Every paper he's published, every grant he's received, every accolade based on this stolen methodology. And I need to know if there are other victims. Academic plagiarists rarely stop at one theft. Patricia's eyes gleamed. Now this is interesting. Give me 2 weeks and access to academic databases. I'll find the bodies. You have 1 week, an unlimited budget. Even better. By noon, the team was assembled and working. Victoria felt the familiar rush of a campaign beginning, that sense of purpose, of forward momentum, of finally doing something instead of just enduring. She found Ethan in the garden, ostensibly trimming roses, but really just standing there, staring at nothing. The team is in place, she said. Legal, custody, investigation. We're moving forward. Ethan turned to her, and she saw he'd been crying. Daniel asked me this morning if he has to go live with his mother. I didn't know what to tell him. Victoria's heart clenched. What did you say? I said I would never let that happen, but I don't know if that's a promise I can keep. Then we'll keep it together. She put a hand on his arm. Sarah Walsh is the best custody lawyer in the state. If anyone can protect Daniel, it's her. And if Jennifer has Marcus funding her legal team, then we outspend them. Ethan, I meant what I said, whatever it takes. He looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. I don't deserve this. Any of this. Yes, you do. You deserve justice. You deserve your career back. You deserve to raise your son in peace. Victoria paused. And you deserve to stop believing the lies Marcus Reed told about you. What if they weren't all lies? What if I really was unstable, obsessive? Stop. Victoria's voice was sharp. That's exactly what he wants you to think. That's how abusers operate, Ethan. They make you doubt your own reality, question your own memory, believe you deserved what they did to you. But you didn't. What happened to you was theft, plain and simple, and we're going to prove it. Before Ethan could respond, Christopher came running across the lawn, Daniel trailing behind him. Mom, Mr. Cole, look what we made. Christopher held up an elaborate structure of sticks and string, some kind of bridge. It's a suspension bridge like the Golden Gate. We learned about tension and compression and... He stopped, seeing the tears on his teacher's face. His excitement dimmed. Is everything okay? Victoria and Ethan exchanged glances. They'd agreed not to burden the children with details, but Christopher was perceptive. He knew something was wrong. Ethan knelt down to Christopher's level. Everything's fine, buddy. I'm just having a tough day. But this bridge, this is amazing. Tell me about the design. Christopher launched into an explanation of their construction process, his enthusiasm rebuilding as he talked. Daniel stood close to his father, one small hand gripping Ethan's sleeve. Watching them, Victoria felt her resolve harden. These children, all three of them, because Christopher was as much a part of this now as Daniel, deserved better than the fear hanging over them. They deserved to learn and play and build bridges without worrying about custody battles or academic fraud. They deserved the childhood that adults' mistakes had stolen from them. That afternoon, Jennifer's lawyers filed the custody petition. Sarah called Victoria immediately. She's moving fast. Petition filed today, hearing scheduled for 3 weeks from now. The complaint is aggressive. She's alleging Ethan is mentally unstable, unable to provide proper care, living in unsuitable conditions, and this is the kicker, inappropriately involved with his employer in a way that affects his judgment. Victoria felt ice slide down her spine. She's implying there's something between me and Ethan. More than implying, she's outright stating it. Says you're manipulating him, that he's compromised, that the living situation is inappropriate for a child. That's absurd. It's also effective. Judges get worried when there's any suggestion of impropriety, especially around children. We need to get ahead of this. How? We file our own motion. We document everything, the employment arrangement, the teaching relationship, your motivation for helping. We make it clear this is about Christopher's education, not anything else. And we get character witnesses who can testify to the appropriateness of the situation. Victoria's mind was already spinning. Helen can testify. She's been here through everything. Marcus, my driver, can verify that Ethan and I have maintained professional boundaries. And she stopped. There was one witness who would be perfect, but using him felt wrong. What? Sarah prompted. Christopher. He could testify to exactly what Ethan has done for him, how their relationship is purely educational. But he's 9 years old. I don't want to put him through that. We won't use him unless we have to, but keep him in reserve. Sometimes the threat of a child testifying is enough to make the other side back down. After Sarah hung up, Victoria sat in her office feeling sick. She'd known there would be attacks, but having Jennifer weaponize her help, twist it into something ugly. It was worse than she'd anticipated. A knock at the door. Ethan entered, looking pale. I just got served with the custody papers. Victoria, I'm so sorry. The things she's saying about you are lies designed to undermine our case. I expected it. But your reputation can survive some gossip. The question is whether you can. Ethan sank into a chair. I don't know anymore. Maybe Jennifer's right. Maybe I am unfit. I'm living in a cottage on someone else's property, working a job I'm overqualified for, teaching a child who isn't even mine. Stop it. Victoria's voice was steel. You're a father who's protecting his son. You're a teacher who couldn't stop teaching even when everything was taken from you. You're a man who's been knocked down repeatedly and keeps getting back up. That's not unfitness, that's courage. Then why does it feel like I'm failing? Because they want you to feel that way. Because if you believe their narrative, you'll give up, you'll run, you'll let them win. Victoria leaned forward. But you're not going to do that, because in 3 weeks, we're going to walk into that courtroom and we're going to show the judge exactly who you are, not who Jennifer and Marcus claim you are, but who you really are. And who is that? A damn good father and an exceptional teacher. Everything else is noise. The 3 weeks before the hearing were brutal. Patricia Eng uncovered evidence that Marcus Reed had a history of taking credit for junior colleagues' work. Nothing as blatant as what he'd done to Ethan, but a pattern of appropriation that made his theft more credible. Sarah prepared a devastating case showing Jennifer's abandonment and recent financial troubles. Michael worked on the academic fraud angle, building a timeline that would eventually support a public accusation. But Marcus didn't sit idle. Articles began appearing in education journals questioning Ethan's mental state during his time at Westridge. Anonymous sources claimed he'd been erratic, paranoid, difficult to work with. Old colleagues suddenly had concerns about his teaching methods that they'd never voiced before. Marcus was mobilizing his network, using his influence to poison the well. Then the media got involved. A local news station ran a story about a custody battle with concerning allegations, featuring an interview with Jennifer, looking tearful and maternal. She spoke about a troubled ex-husband, a child living in uncertain circumstances, a concerning relationship between her former spouse and a wealthy employer. The segment didn't name Victoria, but it didn't have to. Within hours, social media had connected the dots. Victoria Hale, billionaire CEO, involved in custody dispute with employee. Speculation ran wild. Was it an affair? Was she trying to buy a family? Why was she inserting herself into other people's lives? The board of her company called an emergency meeting. Shareholders were concerned. The stock price dipped. Victoria stood in front of 15 executives and board members, feeling their judgment like a physical weight. "I'm helping an employee who was wronged," she said calmly. "Someone who's been an exceptional teacher to my son. There's nothing inappropriate about it." "The optics are terrible," one board member said. "People are questioning your judgment." "Let them. My judgment is fine." "Victoria, we understand you want to help, but this is affecting the company. Stock prices are down 3%. Investors are worried you're distracted." "I'm not distracted. Q3 earnings were our best on record. Every project is on schedule. This personal matter hasn't affected my professional performance." "But it could. If this blows up, if there's a scandal." "There won't be a scandal because there's nothing scandalous happening. I'm supporting someone who was the victim of academic fraud, and I'm doing it with my own money, not company resources. My personal life is my own." The meeting ended with tense disapproval, but no action. Victoria left knowing she'd bought time, but not much. That evening, she found Ethan at the cottage. He was packing. "What are you doing?" she asked, though she already knew. "Leaving. Taking Daniel and disappearing before the hearing. I can't let you keep sacrificing for me, Victoria. Your company, your reputation, it's too much." "Absolutely not. You don't have a choice. I'm choosing to walk away." Victoria stepped fully into the cottage, closing the door behind her. "If you run now, you'll be running forever. Jennifer will win by default. Marcus will continue to profit from your work. And every student you could have taught, every child you could have helped understand the world, they'll never know you existed. Better that than watching you destroy everything you've built for someone like me." "Someone like you?" Victoria's voice rose. "You mean someone decent? Someone who actually cares about children learning instead of just performing? Someone who's been hurt and still chooses kindness? Someone broken?" "You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference." Victoria moved closer. "Ethan, I've spent 18 months watching my son fade away. Watching him lose his joy, his curiosity, his belief in himself. And in 2 months, you gave all of that back to him. You think I'm sacrificing for you? I'm not. I'm fighting for what matters, for children being taught by people who actually care, for good people being protected instead of punished, for a world where Marcus Reed doesn't get to win." Ethan's hands were shaking. "I'm so tired of fighting." "I know. So let me fight for a while. Let me be the strong one." "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why does this matter so much to you?" Victoria had asked herself that question 100 times over the past weeks. The easy answer was Christopher. The true answer was more complicated. "Because when Richard died, I thought strength meant doing everything alone. Never asking for help, never admitting weakness, never letting anyone see me struggle. And that almost destroyed me and Christopher both." Her voice softened. "You showed me a different kind of strength, the kind that asks for help, the kind that admits when things are hard, the kind that keeps showing up even when everything feels impossible." "I don't feel strong." "That's because you're in the middle of it. But from where I'm standing, you're the strongest person I know." They stood in the small cottage, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and something shifted between them. An understanding, maybe, or recognition, two people who'd been broken by loss finding something whole in each other. Ethan unpacked the boxes. Part 4. Louis. Viết sao nghìn đến sao nghìn năm trăm từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hối thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ ba, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau,
câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chỉ dẫn bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí, không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu.
Show More 1547 Part 4. Choosing Truth Over Power. The courthouse was smaller than Victoria had expected. She'd imagined something grand and imposing, but the family court building was utilitarian, beige walls, fluorescent lighting, the kind of institutional architecture designed for efficiency rather than drama. Yet standing in the corridor outside courtroom 3, waiting for the custody hearing to begin, Victoria felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest like a physical thing. Ethan stood beside her, wearing the only suit he owned, slightly too large now, bought back when he'd been a different person living a different life. Daniel clutched his father's hand, silent and pale, in his pressed shirt and tie. Sarah Walsh reviewed her notes one final time, her expression focused and sharp. Across the corridor, Jennifer waited with her legal team, 2 lawyers in expensive suits flanking her like guards. She'd dressed carefully for the hearing, Victoria noted. Conservative dress, minimal makeup, the picture of concerned motherhood. When she looked at Daniel, her expression softened into something that might have passed for love if you didn't know it was performance. Marcus Reed sat on the bench beside Jennifer's lawyers, a statement of support that was also a veiled threat. He was a handsome man in his late 50s, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of easy confidence that came from years of being believed without question. When his eyes met Victoria's, he smiled, a small, cold curve of lips that said he knew exactly what game they were playing, and he believed he'd already won. Victoria held his gaze until he looked away first. All rise. They filed into the courtroom. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Victoria had researched her extensively. Morrison had a reputation for fairness, but also for intolerance of manipulation. She valued evidence over emotion, facts over theater. That should work in their favor if they could present the facts clearly enough. Jennifer's lawyer, a polished man named Richard Hastings, stood first. His opening statement was a masterclass in narrative framing, not lies exactly, but truth arranged to tell a specific story. Your Honor, this case is about a mother's love and a mother's rights. Mrs. Cole made the difficult decision 18 months ago to allow her ex-husband primary custody of their son, Daniel. She did so because at that time she was not in a position to provide the stability a young child needs. But circumstances change. Mrs. Cole has since remarried, established a stable home, and found herself in a position to offer Daniel opportunities she couldn't provide before. Hastings gestured toward Jennifer, who had arranged her face into an expression of dignified sadness. Meanwhile, the child's father has been living in a guest cottage on an employer's estate, working as a groundskeeper despite his education. While we don't question Mr. Cole's love for his son, we do question whether the current arrangement serves Daniel's best interests, particularly given the concerning relationship between Mr. Cole and his employer, Mrs. Victoria Hale. Victoria felt Ethan tense beside her. Mrs. Hale has inserted herself into this family's life in ways that raise serious questions, Hastings continued. She has provided Mr. Cole with financial support, legal representation far beyond his means, and has involved herself intimately in decisions regarding his son. This level of involvement suggests either an inappropriate personal relationship or an unhealthy dependency that compromises Mr. Cole's judgment as a parent. Sarah stood smoothly, objecting before Hastings could continue painting implications as facts. Judge Morrison sustained the objection, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Hastings called his first witness, Jennifer Cole. She took the stand with practiced grace, settling into the chair like she belonged there. Under Hastings' gentle questioning, she wove a story of regret and redemption, a woman who'd made mistakes but learned from them, who'd spent 18 months working on herself, who was finally ready to be the mother her son deserved. I know I wasn't there for Daniel when he needed me most, Jennifer said, her voice catching at exactly the right moments.
The divorce was difficult. I was struggling with my own pain, my own sense of failure. I made the choice to step back because I thought Daniel would be better off with his father. But not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about my son, that I haven't missed him. It was a compelling performance. Victoria could see the judge's expression softening slightly. "And what changed?" Hastings asked. "What made you decide to seek custody now?" "I'm in a better place now. Emotionally, financially, psychologically. My husband David and I have built a stable home. We have resources, a support system. I can give Daniel things Ethan can't: a proper school, extracurricular activities, stability." "You mentioned stability. Can you speak to your concerns about Daniel's current living situation?" Jennifer's expression shifted to worry. "When I visited the estate where Ethan is living, I was shocked. Daniel is essentially growing up in servants' quarters, raised by a father who's working as hired help. And the relationship between Ethan and Mrs. Hale, it's inappropriate for a child to be exposed to that kind of dynamic." "What dynamic do you mean?" "An employer who's clearly romantically involved with her employee, even though both deny it. A woman with no training in child development making decisions about my son's education and care. The whole situation is unstable and inappropriate." Sarah's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Cole, you said you think about Daniel every day. How many times have you contacted him in the past 18 months? Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. "I thought it would be easier for him if I maintained distance. Clean break." "So 0 times. You've had 0 contact with your 6-year-old son in 18 months. It was what was best. Best for whom? You testified that you left the marriage because the divorce was difficult. But Mr. Cole wasn't divorcing you, was he? You were the one who initiated divorce proceedings." Yes, but... And you initiated those proceedings while Mr. Cole was dealing with the destruction of his career, correct? While he was at his most vulnerable? You couldn't handle standing by your husband when things got difficult. But now that he's rebuilt a life, now that he's providing stability for your son, you've decided you want custody back. Interesting timing. Hastings objected. Judge Morrison told Sarah to move on. "Mrs. Cole, you mentioned resources. Can you tell the court about your current financial situation?" "My husband David and I are comfortable." "Comfortable. Not wealthy, though. In fact, David's business, a tech startup, is struggling financially, isn't it? Your household income has dropped 40% in the last 6 months. Jennifer's jaw tightened. "That's temporary. Every business has fluctuations. And child support payments would help stabilize that fluctuation, wouldn't they? Not to mention potential access to the trust fund Mr. Cole established for Daniel. This isn't about money. Then it won't bother you that Mr. Cole has no intention of providing additional financial support beyond what's already mandated, that the trust fund is locked until Daniel turns 18, that custody would not change your financial situation at all." Sarah let the silence hang, then continued. "Let's talk about your concern regarding Mrs. Hale's involvement. You characterized it as inappropriate. What evidence do you have of romantic involvement between Mrs. Hale and Mr. Cole?" "It's obvious to anyone who—" "Evidence, Mrs. Cole. Have you witnessed anything that would suggest an inappropriate relationship?" "No, but the level of support she's providing. Mrs. Hale is providing legal support to an employee who was wronged. Is it your testimony that wealthy people should not help those with fewer resources?" "That's not what I—" "Do you believe Mrs. Hale's motivation for helping could be her son's well-being, that perhaps her son has benefited from Mr. Cole's teaching?" Jennifer's expression hardened. "She's helping because she's infatuated with him." Speculation. "Do you have any evidence of infatuation?" "No." "Any evidence of inappropriate behavior around the children?" "No, but any evidence that Daniel has been harmed in any way by the current living arrangement?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "No. In fact, Mrs. Cole, you haven't seen Daniel at all until 3 weeks ago. You have no idea whether he's thriving or struggling, happy or sad, because you abandoned him 18 months ago and didn't look back until it was convenient for you." "Objection!" Hastings was on his feet. "Sustained. Ms. Walsh, rephrase or move on." Sarah nodded, but the point had landed. She had a few more questions that established Jennifer's lack of involvement in Daniel's life, her financial motivations, her sudden interest coinciding with economic need. By the time Jennifer left the stand, her performance had been thoroughly dismantled, but Hastings wasn't done.
The petitioner calls Dr. Marcus Reed. Victoria felt Ethan go rigid beside her. Marcus took the stand with the easy confidence of someone who'd testified before, who knew how to present authority. Hastings established his credentials quickly. PhD from Stanford, 15 years teaching at elite institutions, published author, recognized expert in educational technology. Dr. Reed, you know the respondent, Ethan Cole? I do. He worked under my supervision at Westridge Academy for 5 years. Can you characterize your working relationship? I tried to mentor Ethan. He showed promise as a young teacher, but he had significant personal issues that affected his professional judgment. Ethan leaned forward, whispering urgently to Sarah. She nodded, making notes. What kind of personal issues? Hastings asked. Ethan became increasingly paranoid and unstable. He fixated on the idea that I was stealing his work, when, in reality, he'd been assisting with my research. When I tried to address his concerns, he became aggressive, made threats. The school eventually had to let him go for everyone's safety. Did Mr. Cole ever threaten you physically? Not explicitly, but there were implications. Comments about how people who stole from others deserved to pay. It was concerning enough that I documented everything. And how do you think this history affects his fitness as a parent? Sarah objected, but Morrison allowed the question. I think Ethan is a deeply troubled man who hasn't addressed his mental health issues. Someone in that state can't provide the stability a child needs. I worry about Daniel being raised by someone so prone to paranoid thinking and aggression. Victoria watched Marcus testify with growing rage. Every word was calibrated for maximum damage while staying just inside the bounds of plausibility. He was painting Ethan as dangerous without saying anything actionable. Sarah's cross-examination began gently. Dr. Reed, you testified that Mr. Cole assisted with your research. What specifically did he assist with? Data collection mostly, running experiments with students, compiling results. And the methodology itself? The adaptive learning system you've become known for. Who developed the core algorithms? I did. Ethan helped implement them, but the theoretical framework was my work. Interesting. When did you first conceive of this methodology? Marcus didn't hesitate. About 6 years ago. I'd been thinking about adaptive learning for years, but that's when the concrete framework came together. Sarah pulled out a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a grant proposal written by Dr. Reed 7 years ago. In it, he outlines his research interests. Notably absent is any mention of adaptive learning or educational technology. His focus at that time was entirely on traditional pedagogical methods. Hastings objected, but Morrison allowed the document. Sarah continued. Dr. Reed, if you conceived of this methodology 6 years ago, why is there no mention of it in any of your grant proposals, published papers, or conference presentations until 4 years ago? Which coincidentally is exactly when Mr. Cole began developing his system. Research evolves. I didn't publicize my thinking until the framework was more developed. How convenient. Let's talk about the documentation you mentioned. You said you documented Mr. Cole's concerning behavior. Do you have those documents with you? Some of them. Email exchanges, meeting notes. Can you provide the court with the originals, with metadata showing when they were created? A flicker of something crossed Marcus's face. Too fast for most people to catch, but Victoria saw it. Uncertainty. I can provide copies. Not originals. That's interesting. Because Mr. Cole has original documentation with intact metadata showing the development of this methodology dating back 5 years. Before you claim to have conceived of it, would you like to see it? Hastings was objecting now, claiming this was outside the scope of the custody hearing. Morrison overruled him. This speaks to Dr. Reed's credibility as a witness, which is absolutely relevant. Sarah displayed Ethan's files on the courtroom screen. Emails, code repositories, research notes, all with timestamps that predated Marcus's claimed work. Dr. Reed, can you explain why Mr. Cole has documentation of this methodology dating back 5 years while your earliest documentation is only 4 years old? He must have backdated the files. Backdated them? On a university server with independent verification? That would require hacking into secured systems. Are you accusing Mr. Cole of that level of technical sophistication and criminal behavior? Marcus's composure was cracking. I'm saying the timeline is wrong. Or the timeline is correct and you stole Ethan Cole's work. used your position of authority to claim credit for his innovation. And when he tried to fight back, you destroyed his career to protect yourself.
That's absurd.
Is it? Because I have testimony from 3 other former junior faculty members at Westridge who say you have a pattern of appropriating their work. I have documentation showing that every major publication you've produced in the last decade had a junior colleague listed as research assistant, who later claimed you stole their ideas. I have— Objection, Hastings was shouting now. This is not relevant to custody. It absolutely is, Sarah fired back. Dr. Reed is testifying to Mr. Cole's mental state, claiming he's paranoid and unstable. But if Dr. Reed actually did steal his work, then Mr. Cole wasn't paranoid. He was accurate. That goes directly to the credibility of this witness and his characterization of my client. Morrison looked at Marcus with new interest. I'll allow it. Dr. Reed, answer the question. Marcus's face had gone red. Those colleagues misunderstood the collaborative process. 5 different colleagues over 10 years all misunderstood? That's quite a pattern of misunderstanding. The rest of Marcus's testimony devolved into defensive backpedaling. By the time Sarah finished with him, his credibility was in tatters. But the custody hearing wasn't about academic fraud. It was about Daniel's best interests. Hastings called one more witness, a child psychologist who'd interviewed Daniel twice at Jennifer's request. The psychologist testified that Daniel seemed anxious, withdrawn, possibly suffering from the instability of his living situation. Sarah's cross-examination revealed that both interviews had occurred in Jennifer's lawyer's office, with Jennifer present, hardly a neutral environment for assessing a 6-year-old's mental state. Then it was their turn. Sarah called Helen first. The housekeeper testified about Ethan's consistent presence in Daniel's life, his patient parenting, the loving relationship between father and son. She described how the boy had flourished under Ethan's care, how he'd gone from anxious and jumpy when they first arrived to more confident and secure. Has Mr. Cole ever acted inappropriately around the children? Sarah asked. Never. He's been nothing but professional and caring. And Mrs. Hale's involvement, have you observed anything that would suggest an improper relationship? Absolutely not. Mrs. Hale has been helping Mr. Cole because her son has benefited tremendously from his teaching. It's that simple. Next came Christopher. Victoria had agonized over this decision. Using a 9-year-old as a witness felt wrong on every level. But Sarah had convinced her it was necessary. Christopher could speak to Ethan's character in ways no adult could. Christopher took the stand looking small but determined in his suit. Judge Morrison's expression softened as she addressed him. Hello, Christopher. I'm Judge Morrison. I know this might be a little scary, but I just want to ask you some questions. Is that okay? Yes, ma'am. Good. Now, you know Mr. Cole, right? Yes, he's my teacher. And what's he like as a teacher? Christopher's face lit up. He's the best teacher I've ever had. He makes everything make sense. Like, I used to think I was bad at math, but Mr. Cole showed me I wasn't bad. I just needed someone to explain it differently. He's really patient. Even when I ask the same question 5 times, he just finds a new way to help me understand. That sounds wonderful. Do you spend time with Mr. Cole's son, Daniel? Yeah, Daniel's my friend. We build stuff together. Mr. Cole teaches us both, shows us how things work, like gravity and bridges and electricity. It's really fun. Has Mr. Cole ever been mean to you or Daniel? No, never. He's really nice. When Daniel gets sad about his mom being gone, Mr. Cole always knows how to make him feel better. And your mother, Mrs. Hale, has she been involved in these lessons? Sometimes she watches. She says she's learning too. She wants to understand how I learn best so she can help me. Do you think there's anything wrong with Mr. Cole teaching you? Christopher looked confused by the question. Wrong? No. It's the best thing that's happened to me since my dad died. The courtroom was silent. Even Hastings seemed to recognize that cross-examining a grieving child about his dead father would be a disaster. Finally, Ethan took the stand. He looked nervous but composed as Sarah walked him through his history, his years of teaching, his development of the methodology, the betrayal by Marcus, the collapse of his marriage, the decision to keep custody of Daniel. Why did you want custody of your son? Sarah asked. Because he's my son. Because Jennifer made it clear she was moving on to a new life and didn't want the responsibility. Because I couldn't imagine my life without him.
Ethan's voice was steady. Daniel is everything to me. Every decision I've made in the past 18 months has been about keeping him safe, giving him stability, making sure he knows he's loved. Tell the court about your current living situation.
We live in the guest cottage on the Hale estate. It's small but comfortable. Daniel has his own room, a yard to play in, safety. Mrs. Hale pays me fairly for groundskeeping work and for tutoring Christopher. We have health insurance, savings, security. Why did you accept Mrs. Hale's help with legal representation? Because I couldn't afford to fight this battle alone. And because she believed me when no one else did. She looked at the evidence, saw what Marcus had done, and decided it was worth fighting for the truth. Not because of any inappropriate relationship, but because she's a person who believes in justice. Sarah paused. Mr. Cole, are you romantically involved with Mrs. Hale? No. Have you ever been? No. Has she ever suggested or implied such a relationship? Never. Mrs. Hale has been nothing but professional and kind.
She's helped me because my teaching helped her son, and because she saw injustice and decided to do something about it. That's all. Hastings' cross-examination tried to paint Ethan as unstable, dependent, unable to provide adequately for his son. But Ethan remained calm, answering each question with quiet dignity. Isn't it true that you've been unable to find employment in your chosen field? I've been unable to find employment in education because, Doctor,
Reed destroyed my reputation with false accusations. But I'm still a teacher. I teach Christopher. I teach Daniel. I teach anyone who wants to learn. You're working as a groundskeeper. Is that really the best you can offer your son? I'm working as a groundskeeper because it's honest work that allows me to be present for Daniel. I'm there when he wakes up, when he goes to school, when he comes home. I help with homework, make dinner, read bedtime stories. I'm his father, every single day. That's what I offer him, not money or prestige, but presence. And if you lose this hearing, if custody is awarded to Mrs. Cole? Ethan's composure finally cracked. Then I lose everything that matters. But I'll still fight to be part of Daniel's life because that's what fathers do. They don't give up. The final witness was Victoria herself. She took the stand feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her. Jennifer's calculation, Marcus's hostility, Ethan's desperate hope. Sarah's questions were straightforward, establishing Victoria's relationship with Ethan as employer and friend, her motivation for helping him, the benefit Christopher had derived from Ethan's teaching. Mrs. Hale, why are you here today? Victoria looked directly at Judge Morrison. Because I've seen what Ethan Cole can do, not just for my son, but for any child lucky enough to learn from him. He's a gifted teacher who was wronged by someone who should have been his mentor. And now that same person is trying to help take his son away to prevent Ethan from ever clearing his name. She paused. I'm here because I believe in fighting for people who've been wronged. And because I've learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do with power and money is use it to protect people who deserve protection. Hastings' cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Hale, you're a billionaire. You could hire any tutor in the world for your son. Why specifically Mr. Cole? Because Christopher needed more than credentials. He needed someone who understood how he learned, who could reach him where he was. Ethan did that. And you became personally invested in Mr. Cole's well-being. I became invested in justice. Isn't it true that you've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on Mr. Cole's legal defense? I've spent money on lawyers, yes. Why? What is Mr. Cole to you that you'd spend that kind of money? Victoria held Hastings' gaze. He's someone who deserved better than what he got. Someone who's been punished for being right. Someone whose son deserves to stay with the parent who actually loves him. That's worth fighting for. Or perhaps he's something more than just an employee. Perhaps this level of investment suggests feelings that go beyond professional respect. My feelings are irrelevant. The facts are what matter. Ethan Cole is a devoted father. Jennifer Cole abandoned her son. Those are the facts. The facts, Mrs. Hale, are that you've inserted yourself into a family situation that doesn't concern you, that you're using your wealth to influence an outcome that serves your interests. My only interest is in seeing a good father keep custody of his son. If that's somehow wrong, then our priorities are very different. The hearing concluded with closing arguments. Hastings painted a picture of instability masked by wealth, of inappropriate relationships disguised as charity. Sarah methodically destroyed Jennifer's credibility, highlighted Ethan's consistent parenting, and exposed Marcus Reed as the true source of Ethan's professional destruction. Judge Morrison said she'd issue a ruling within 2 weeks. They left the courthouse in silence. Outside, reporters had gathered. Someone had tipped them off about the billionaire's involvement in a custody case. Victoria fielded questions with practiced ease while Sarah hustled Ethan and Daniel to a waiting car. Marcus Reed stood on the courthouse steps, giving his own statement to a different cluster of reporters. This case reflects a troubling trend of wealthy individuals using their resources to manipulate family court proceedings, he was saying. Mr. Cole needs to address his mental health issues, not hide behind billionaire benefactors. Victoria walked straight up to him, ignoring the cameras. Dr. Reed, enjoy your moment. It's going to be your last. Marcus smiled coldly. Is that a threat, Mrs. Hale? It's a promise. Every paper you've published based on stolen work, every award you've won through fraud, every colleague you've exploited, it's all going to come out. And when it does, you'll lose everything Ethan lost, except you'll deserve it. You're making a mistake taking me on. No, you made the mistake when you stole from someone who had people willing to fight for him. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing there with cameras rolling. The drive back to the estate was quiet. Daniel fell asleep against his father's shoulder. Ethan stared out the window, his expression unreadable. You did well in there, Victoria said quietly. Did I? It felt like I was drowning. You told the truth. That matters. Does it? Because Marcus lied, and he sounded just as convincing. Victoria wanted to promise him that truth always won, that justice always prevailed, but she'd lived long enough to know that wasn't true. Sometimes the liars won. Sometimes the wrong people got everything while the good people got nothing. But not this time. She wouldn't allow it. Back at the estate, Helen had dinner waiting. They ate quietly, Daniel picking at his food, Christopher chattering nervously to fill the silence. Afterward, Ethan carried his sleeping son to the cottage while Victoria retreated to her office. She called Patricia Eng. Tell me you found something we can use. Better than that, I found 3 former colleagues willing to testify that Reed has a pattern of stealing junior faculty work. I found inconsistencies in his published papers, sections that match other people's research with minor changes. And I found financial records showing he's been receiving grants based on fraudulent credentials. How solid is it? Solid enough to destroy him if we go public. But Victoria, if we do this, if we actually expose him, it's going to be war. Universities protect their stars. Reed has powerful allies. Then we make sure the evidence is so overwhelming they have no choice but to cut him loose. That's going to require more than just documentation. We need someone willing to stand up publicly and challenge him, someone credible. Ethan. Can he handle it? He's already dealing with the custody battle. Victoria thought about Ethan's face in the courtroom, the way he'd held himself together even when everything was falling apart. He's stronger than people give him credit for. Let me talk to him. She found him sitting on the cottage steps an hour later, staring up at the stars. Can't sleep? She asked. Keep replaying the hearing in my head, wondering if I said the right things, if I should have answered differently. Victoria sat beside him. You were perfect. I didn't feel perfect. I felt terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Patricia found evidence, Victoria said. Enough to expose Marcus. But it requires you to go public. To stand up and accuse him openly with your name attached. Ethan's hands clenched. That's what he'll use against me in the custody case. See, Judge Morrison? He's obsessed, paranoid, can't let go. Or it proves you were right all along, that you weren't paranoid, you were accurate, that everything you said about Marcus was true. It's risky. Everything worth doing is risky. But I won't push you. This has to be your choice. Ethan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. My whole life, I've tried to do the right thing. Be a good teacher, a good husband, a good father. And I kept getting punished for it. Eventually, I started wondering if maybe I was wrong. Maybe the world didn't work the way I thought it did. Maybe people like Marcus were just smarter than people like me. You don't believe that? No, but I thought it for a while. Thought maybe I should just accept how things are and stop fighting. He turned to look at her. Then you showed me something different. You showed me that sometimes people with power actually use it for good, that fighting back is possible, that the truth matters. So? So let's do it. Let's expose Marcus Reed for exactly what he is. Let's make sure everyone knows the truth. Victoria felt something fierce and bright unfold in her chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. Then tomorrow we go to war.
Part 5. Lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc.
Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan man. Phần 5 giải quyết hết vấn đề và kết thúc trọn vẹn câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa, lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chỉ dẫn bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Show more 15:50 2 phút PR 5, breakthrough và ending. The morning after their decision to expose Marcus Reed, Victoria woke to a call from Sarah Walsh. We got the ruling. Morrison issued it early. Victoria's heart stopped. And? Full custody to Ethan. Jennifer's petition denied. Morrison cited overwhelming evidence of stable parenting versus abandonment. She also noted that Dr. Reed's credibility as a character witness was severely compromised by apparent inconsistencies in his testimony. Victoria closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. Does Ethan know? I'm calling him next. But Victoria, Morrison added something unusual. She wrote in her decision that she was troubled by allegations of academic fraud, that while outside this court's jurisdiction speak to a pattern of dishonesty that undermines witness credibility. She basically handed us ammunition for the next fight. Then we use it. Victoria found Ethan in the cottage kitchen, making breakfast for Daniel. She didn't say anything, just handed him her phone with Sarah's email open. She watched his face as he read. Disbelief, then hope, then finally tears streaming down his cheeks as he pulled Daniel into a fierce hug. We won, buddy. You're staying with me. Nobody's taking you anywhere. Daniel didn't fully understand, but he understood enough. He wrapped his small arms around his father's neck and held on tight. Christopher, who'd followed Victoria over, let out a whoop of joy. Daniel gets to stay! Mom, can we celebrate? Can we do something special? Victoria looked at Ethan, still holding his son, and felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with victory and everything to do with the man standing before her, finally allowing himself to believe that good things could happen. We'll celebrate tonight, she said, but first, we have work to do. The press conference was scheduled for that afternoon. Patricia had arranged everything, a venue in downtown, invited reporters from major outlets, ensured that education journals would be represented. They'd spent the morning preparing, making sure every piece of evidence was airtight, every claim defensible. Ethan stood in Victoria's office, staring at the prepared statement in his hands. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. Victoria adjusted his tie. He'd bought a new suit for this, proper armor for the battle ahead. You've been silent for 18 months. Today, you get your voice back. What if nobody believes me? They will. Because we have proof. Because 3 other victims are standing with you. Because the evidence is undeniable. She met his eyes. And because you're telling the truth, and the truth matters. Michael Chen appeared in the doorway. Car's ready. We need to leave in 10 minutes. Victoria nodded, then turned back to Ethan. Last chance to back out. If you want to walk away, just live your life in peace with Daniel. I'll understand. Ethan looked down at the statement again, then folded it and put it in his pocket. No. Marcus has gotten away with this for too long. If I don't speak up, he'll do it to someone else. Some other young teacher who trusts him, who thinks he's a mentor. I can't let that happen. The press conference venue was packed. Reporters filled every seat, cameras lined the back wall, and the energy in the room crackled with anticipation. Word had spread that billionaire Victoria Hale was about to make a major announcement involving academic fraud, the kind of scandal that sold papers and drove clicks. Victoria took the podium first, her presence commanding immediate attention. Thank you for coming. I'm here today to speak about a matter of justice and integrity in our education system. 18 months ago, a talented teacher named Ethan Cole had his career destroyed by academic fraud. His innovative methodology for personalized learning, a breakthrough that could have transformed how we teach children, was stolen by his mentor, Dr. Marcus Reed. When Mr. Cole tried to defend his work, Dr. Reed used his institutional power to brand Mr. Cole as unstable, paranoid, and dishonest. Mr. Cole lost his job, his reputation, and nearly lost his son. The room was silent except for the click of camera shutters. Today, we're here to set the record straight, to present evidence that Dr. Marcus Reed built his recent career on stolen work, and to ensure that Mr. Cole's name is cleared and his contribution to education is finally recognized. She stepped aside, and Ethan took her place at the podium. He looked terrified. His hands shook as he gripped the edges of the podium, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. My name is Ethan Cole. 5 years ago, I developed an adaptive learning methodology that could personalize education for each student. I spent 3 years testing it, refining it, documenting every step. It worked. Students who'd been struggling suddenly excelled. Children who'd thought they were incapable discovered they could learn anything with the right approach. Ethan pulled out a folder, held it up. This contains my original research notes, code repositories, and student data, all with verifiable timestamps. Dr. Marcus Reed claimed this work as his own, and when I challenged him, he destroyed my career. Today, I'm reclaiming my work and my reputation. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Cole, these are serious accusations. What proof do you have? Michael stepped forward, distributing packets to the press. In these packets, you'll find timeline comparisons showing Mr. Cole's work predates Dr. Reed's by over a year. You'll find testimony from 3 other former colleagues of Dr. Reed who report similar patterns of appropriation. And you'll find analysis of Dr. Reed's published papers showing sections that closely mirror Mr. Cole's original work with only minor modifications. Another reporter. Where's Dr. Reed? Does he have a response? Dr. Reed was invited to attend this press conference, Victoria said. He declined. However, we've sent all this evidence to Cascade University, to the journals that published his work, and to the organizations that granted him awards based on this methodology. They're reviewing it now. The questions came rapid fire after that. Ethan answered them with growing confidence, explaining the methodology, walking through the timeline, detailing how Marcus had systematically stolen his work while building a paper trail that made the theft look legitimate. Then one of the 3 other victims spoke, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been a junior researcher under Marcus 3 years ago. Dr. Reed took my research on student engagement and published it under his name, with me listed as a research assistant, she said, her voice shaking but determined. When I confronted him, he told me that's how academia works. Junior researchers contribute to senior researchers' work. I didn't fight because I thought he was right, that I was just naive. But after seeing what he did to Mr. Cole, I realized it wasn't naivety, it was theft. The press conference lasted 2 hours. By the end, social media was exploding with the story. Academic fraud, stolen research, a billionaire fighting for justice. It had everything the internet loved. Marcus Reed issued a statement through his lawyer within hours, calling the accusations baseless and defamatory, claiming this was a coordinated attack by a troubled former employee and his wealthy benefactor. He threatened legal action. Victoria's response was simple. We welcome legal action. Discovery will be very interesting. The next 72 hours were chaos. News outlets picked up the story nationally. Education journals launched investigations. Cascade University put Marcus on administrative leave pending review. The organizations that had given him awards based on the stolen methodology quietly began their own inquiries. And then, 3 days after the press conference, something unexpected happened. A senior professor from Westridge Academy, the school where it had all begun, came forward with evidence. Dr. Helen Matsuda had been on the investigative committee that had cleared Marcus and fired Ethan. She'd stayed silent for 18 months, but watching the press conference had broken something inside her. I knew, she told reporters in her own statement. When we investigated Mr. Cole's claims, I saw evidence that supported his version of events. But Marcus Reed was a star. He brought prestige to the school, grants, recognition. The administration made it clear they wanted the problem to go away quietly. So I voted with the majority, and I've regretted it every day since. Her testimony was the tipping point. Westridge's current administration, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, released internal documents showing that the original investigation had been compromised. Emails revealed that Marcus had pressured the committee, that evidence supporting Ethan had been deliberately minimized. The narrative collapsed overnight. Marcus Reed resigned from Cascade University to focus on clearing his name. 2 of the journals that had published his work retracted the papers. The grant organizations demanded repayment of funds. His speaking engagements were canceled. The prestigious award he'd won, the one Victoria had watched him accept while Ethan's career burned, was formally rescinded. Everything Ethan had lost, Marcus was now losing. The difference was Marcus deserved it. Victoria watched the news coverage from her office, feeling satisfaction mixed with something more complex. Vindication, yes, but also sadness that it had taken so long, that Ethan had suffered for 18 months before anyone listened. A knock at her door. Ethan entered, looking shell-shocked. "Did you see? Stanford is asking me to speak at their education conference next month. They want me to present the methodology, my methodology, to their faculty. Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me is terrified it's all going to fall apart again." Victoria stood, moving around her desk to face him. "It won't, because this time you have documentation, you have witnesses, you have proof, and you have people who believe in you. People like you. Yes, people like me." They stood close enough that Victoria could see the flecks of gold in Ethan's dark eyes, close enough that she was suddenly very aware of how much time they'd been spending together, how much she'd come to depend on his presence in her life. "Victoria, Ethan started, then stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "What?" "I need to tell you something about why I've been so resistant to your help, why I kept trying to push you away, even when you were offering everything I needed. You were protecting yourself. That's understandable. It's more than that." Ethan took a breath. "I was scared of what I was starting to feel, about you, about this, because letting you help meant admitting I needed someone. And needing someone meant being vulnerable, and being vulnerable meant risking getting hurt again." Victoria's heart was suddenly loud in her chest. "And now? Now I'm still scared, but I'm also tired of letting fear make my decisions. I'm tired of pushing away good things because I'm afraid they'll be taken from me." "Ethan, let me finish. You saved my career. You saved my custody of Daniel. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. And somewhere in all of that I started—" He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I started caring about you, not as an employer or a benefactor, but as someone I want in my life, someone who makes me want to be brave again." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I started caring about you too, weeks ago, if I'm being honest. Watching you with Christopher, with Daniel, seeing how you turn everything into teaching moments, how you make children feel capable and valued, it reminded me of Richard. But it was also completely different. You weren't a replacement for what I lost. You were something new, something I hadn't expected to find. Where does that leave us? I don't know. We need to be careful. For the children, for your reputation, after everything with Jennifer's accusations. I know, but maybe we don't have to figure it all out today. Maybe we can just see what happens. Take it slow." Victoria smiled through her tears. "I think I'd like that." Ethan reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. The touch was electric, sending warmth through her entire body. "Thank you," he said softly. "For everything. For fighting for me when I'd given up. For showing me that good people still exist in the world. For giving me my life back. You gave me something too. You gave me my son back. The real Christopher, the curious, bright, joyful boy he used to be. You reminded me what matters." They stood there, hands almost touching, the space between them charged with possibility. A crash from downstairs broke the moment. They pulled apart, smiling at the sound of Christopher and Daniel's laughter echoing through the house.
I should check on them, Ethan said.
Daniel's teaching Christopher how to make a catapult out of popsicle sticks. It's either going to be educational or destructive. Probably both. As Ethan left, Victoria returned to the window. The garden stretched below, immaculate as always, but somehow more alive than they'd been months ago. She could see the boys on the south terrace, Ethan crouching beside them as they tested their catapult with small paper balls. Christopher was laughing, real, unrestrained laughter. The sound that had stopped her cold that first day. The sound she'd thought was lost forever. Her phone buzzed. Sarah Walsh with an update on Jennifer's response to the custody ruling. As expected, Jennifer wasn't appealing. She'd gotten what she really wanted anyway. The news coverage of Victoria's inappropriate involvement had quietly disappeared once Marcus's fraud was exposed. Without Marcus backing her, without a credible narrative, Jennifer had simply faded away. Good riddance. Victoria's assistant buzzed through on the intercom. Mrs.
Hale?
The board is calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They've seen the news coverage and want to discuss your role in the Reed case. Victoria sighed. Of course they did. The stock price had stabilized once the public turned sympathetic. Billionaire fights for wrong teacher played better than billionaire interferes in custody case. But the board would still have concerns. Schedule it for 9 a.m. and prepare a presentation on Q4 projections. If they want to question my judgment, I'll remind them of my results. The next morning's board meeting was tense but brief. Victoria presented evidence of the company's strongest quarter in 5 years, pointed out that the Reed case had actually generated positive press about corporate social responsibility, and made it clear she wasn't going to apologize for helping someone who deserved help. One board member pushed back. You took a significant risk with the company's reputation. And I'd do it again, Victoria said calmly, because some things matter more than quarterly earnings, like integrity, like justice, like teaching children that when they see something wrong, they should fight to make it right. She looked around the table at the men and women who'd questioned her judgment, who'd worried about stock prices and investor confidence. My son learned more in 2 months with Ethan Cole than he learned in a year with a credentialed tutor. He learned that he's not stupid, that he can understand complex concepts, that learning can be joyful instead of painful. That's worth more than any amount of money. And if helping the person who taught him those things damages this company, then this company has the wrong priorities. The room was silent. Finally, the chairman spoke. Your Q4 results are exceptional, and the public response to your involvement in the Reed case has been largely positive. We'll table this discussion. Translation, they were backing down. Victoria returned home to find her house in controlled chaos. Helen was supervising a small celebration in the dining room. Apparently, Christopher and Daniel had decided they needed a victory party and had enlisted the housekeeper's help. Paper decorations hung from the chandelier. A banner read, Justice for Mr. Cole in Christopher's careful handwriting. There was a cake, store-bought but enthusiastically decorated by the boys with far too much frosting. Ethan stood in the doorway looking overwhelmed and happy. They insisted. I tried to tell them it wasn't necessary. It's perfect, Victoria said, meaning it. They gathered around the table, Victoria, Ethan, Christopher, Daniel, and Helen, who'd been part of this journey from the beginning. The boys insisted on making speeches. Christopher went first. I want to say thank you to Mr. Cole for being the best teacher ever and for not giving up even when bad people were mean to him. And thank you to my mom for being brave and fighting for what's right. Daniel's speech was simpler but no less meaningful. Thank you for letting us stay. As they ate cake and the boys chattered about their latest project, something involving rockets and a disturbing amount of baking soda, Victoria caught Ethan's eye across the table. He smiled and she smiled back, and something wordless passed between them. Not a promise, not yet. Just possibility. That night, after the boys were asleep and Helen had retired to her quarters, Victoria and Ethan found themselves on the south terrace where this had all begun. The same bench where she'd first confronted him about teaching Christopher, where Daniel and Christopher had shared lunches, where so many quiet conversations had taken place. Stanford isn't the only place that's reached out, Ethan said. I've gotten emails from 3 other universities, 2 educational technology companies, and a foundation that wants to fund research on adaptive learning. That's wonderful. It's terrifying. 6 weeks ago, I was invisible. Now everyone wants something from me. You don't have to say yes to everything. Take your time. Figure out what you actually want. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What I want is to keep teaching, not necessarily at a university. I loved working one-on-one with students, seeing them transform when they finally understood something. I want to develop the methodology further, make it available to more teachers, more students. I want to prove that every child can excel with the right approach. Then do that. Start small if you need to. Build something here.
Here. Victoria felt her heart race as she said the words she'd been thinking for weeks. Stay.
Not as my groundskeeper, as my partner in this. Help me create something new. A learning center, maybe, or a teacher training program. Something that puts your methodology into practice, that shows the education world what's possible. Victoria, that would cost a fortune. I have a fortune, and I can't think of a better way to use it.
Why would you do that?
Because education matters. Because children like Christopher and Daniel deserve teachers who understand how they learn. Because you deserve the chance to do the work you were meant to do. She paused. And because I want you to stay. Not just for Christopher or for some grand educational mission, but because I want you in my life. You and Daniel both. Ethan reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I want to stay. I want to build something with you. I want to see where this goes. That even though it's complicated, even though people will talk, will make assumptions about why we're together,
let them talk. We know the truth. That's enough. They sat together on the bench, hands intertwined, looking out at gardens bathed in moonlight. Somewhere in the house, 2 boys slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and safe. Somewhere in Seattle, Marcus Reed was facing the consequences of his actions. Somewhere in her office, Victoria had plans for Q1 that would push her company to new heights. But right now, none of that mattered as much as this moment. This quiet peace. This sense of having found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. What do you think Richard would say? Ethan asked quietly. About all this. About us. Victoria considered the question. For so long, she'd held Richard's memory like a shield, using grief as an excuse to avoid moving forward. But standing here with Ethan, she could finally imagine Richard's response. I think he'd be happy. That Christopher is learning again, that I'm present again, that we're both finding our way forward. Richard wouldn't want us frozen in the past. He'd want us to live. And that's what we're doing? Living? Yes. Finally. 3 months later, the Hale Educational Foundation officially launched. The press conference announcing it featured Ethan as Director of Curriculum Development, with Victoria as founder and primary funder. The foundation's mission was simple: develop and distribute adaptive learning tools that could help every child discover their potential. Christopher and Daniel stood beside their parents. That's what they'd started calling them, at least in private, as reporters asked questions about the foundation's goals. One reporter directed a question at Christopher. What's it like having Mr. Cole as your teacher? Christopher didn't hesitate. It's like learning finally makes sense. He doesn't just tell you things. He helps you understand why they work. And he makes you feel smart even when you're struggling. That's what a real teacher does. The Foundation's first project was creating a free online platform that would allow teachers everywhere to access Ethan's methodology. They partnered with schools in underserved communities, providing training and resources. The early results were remarkable, exactly what Ethan had promised all those years ago when Marcus had stolen his work. Stanford's conference went well. Ethan presented to a packed auditorium, outlining his methodology and sharing data from the Foundation's pilot programs. He received a standing ovation. 3 universities offered him positions. He turned them all down, choosing instead to focus on the Foundation and on continuing to teach Christopher and Daniel. I spent years trying to reach the most students possible, he explained to Victoria one evening. But I've learned that sometimes the most important teaching happens one-on-one, with students who need someone to believe in them, who need someone to show them they're capable. I can do more good here, building something sustainable, than I could at any university. But Jennifer made one more appearance in their lives, reaching out through her lawyer to request a meeting with Daniel. Sarah advised against it, but Ethan surprised everyone by agreeing.
He should know his mother if he wants to, Ethan said. I won't poison that relationship. If she's genuinely trying to be better, Daniel deserves the chance to know her. The meeting happened at a neutral location with a therapist present. Daniel was cautious but open. Jennifer was subdued, genuinely remorseful. She didn't ask for custody changes or more time, just the chance to be part of Daniel's life in whatever capacity he'd allow. Over the following months, they developed a careful relationship. Daniel would video chat with Jennifer twice a month. She sent birthday cards and Christmas presents. It wasn't the relationship Jennifer had originally wanted, but it was honest. And that was more valuable than the performative motherhood she'd tried to claim in court. As for Marcus Reed, his fall was complete. 3 journals retracted his papers. Cascade University terminated his contract. The speaking circuit that had made him wealthy dried up overnight. Last Victoria heard, he was teaching at a small community college under his real name, his reputation destroyed beyond repair. Some people called it excessive. Victoria called it justice. 1 year after that first day when Victoria had heard Christopher's laughter and followed it to a closed study, she found herself in that same room. It had been transformed into a proper classroom now, with whiteboards and science equipment and shelves full of books. Christopher sat at a table with Daniel and 2 other students, children of estate staff who'd asked if Ethan might teach their kids too. He'd agreed without hesitation. Okay, Ethan was saying, so we know water molecules are made of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. But why does ice float? If water freezes into ice, shouldn't it be heavier? Christopher's hand shot up. A year ago, he'd never raised his hand, too afraid of being wrong. Now he participated eagerly, confidently. Because the molecules spread out when they freeze, they take up more space, so ice is less dense than water. Exactly right. And what does that mean for lakes in winter? Daniel answered this time. The ice floats on top, so the fish underneath don't freeze. Perfect. See? You 2 are naturals at this. Victoria watched from the doorway, her heart full. This was what she'd fought for. Not the public vindication or the foundation's success, though those mattered. This, children learning with joy, discovering their capabilities, being taught by someone who believed in them. Ethan noticed her and smiled, that warm, unguarded smile that still made her breath catch. After class, he found her in her office. Christopher asked if you'd join us for the experiment tomorrow. We're building a model solar system with scale distances. It's going to take up most of the south lawn. I wouldn't miss it. Good. Ethan moved closer, comfortable now, in a way he hadn't been months ago. They'd been officially together for 6 months, though they'd been careful to keep things private to let the children adjust. I was thinking, maybe after the solar system project, we could take the boys somewhere. A real vacation. Let Christopher and Daniel pick the destination. They'll choose somewhere with a science museum. Probably. Is that okay? Victoria laughed. It's perfect. Ethan's expression grew serious. I want to talk to you about something. Christopher asked me yesterday when I was going to marry you. Victoria's heart skipped. What did you tell him? I said I hadn't asked you yet. He said I should hurry up because you're really great and someone else might ask first. He did not say that. He absolutely did. He's 9 and already understands market dynamics. They both laughed, but Victoria could see Ethan was genuinely nervous. Victoria, I know it hasn't been that long. I know we agreed to take things slow, but Christopher's not wrong. You are really great, and I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be cautious and scared. I want to choose courage, the way you taught me to. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I'm not asking you to answer right now, but I'm asking you to think about it. About building a life together officially. About being a family, you, me, Christopher, and Daniel. About choosing each other every day. The way we've been choosing each other all along. Victoria looked at the box, then at Ethan's face. This good, brave, brilliant man who'd been knocked down repeatedly and kept getting back up. Who'd lost everything and somehow found the strength to rebuild. Who taught children to believe in themselves because he'd finally learned to believe in himself. I don't need time to think about it, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. Ethan's face lit up with pure joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was simple and beautiful, nothing ostentatious. Exactly right. Really? You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. You said I gave you your life back, but you gave me mine too. You showed me what being present means, what really matters. You helped me remember how to be a mother, not just a CEO. You made me want to be brave again." They kissed then, gentle and sweet, a promise of everything to come. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony in the estate's gardens. Christopher and Daniel stood up with them, grinning identical grins as they promised to be the best brothers to each other. Helen cried. Sarah Walsh and Patricia Eng came, along with Michael Chen and the legal team that had made everything possible. Dr. Helen Matsuda attended too, the professor who'd finally told the truth about Marcus Reed, now serving on the Foundation's advisory board. The ceremony was simple, focused on what mattered. 2 people choosing each other, 2 families becoming one, 2 children gaining the stability they'd always deserved. As they exchanged vows, Victoria looked at the faces around her. Christopher, who was thriving academically and socially, who'd rediscovered his love of learning. Daniel, who'd stopped flinching at loud noises, who smiled freely now, who was building the confident childhood every child deserved. Ethan, who was doing the work he was meant to do, helping countless children discover their potential. And herself, no longer just a billionaire CEO, but a wife, a mother, a partner in something that mattered more than quarterly earnings or stock prices. The reception spilled across the lawn as the sun set golden over the gardens. At one point, Victoria found herself standing with Helen, watching the boys chase fireflies while Ethan talked animatedly with a group of teachers about the Foundation's next project. "You did a good thing, Mrs. Hale," Helen said. "That day you decided to trust Mr. Cole instead of firing him. That changed everything." "He changed everything. I just had the sense to listen." "No, you had the courage to fight when it would have been easier to walk away. That's rare." Victoria thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. So focused on control, on power, on maintaining her empire that she'd almost lost what mattered most. She'd been surviving instead of living, holding on instead of moving forward. It had taken a groundskeeper's laughter with her son to wake her up, to show her that real strength wasn't about doing everything alone. Real strength was knowing when to ask for help, when to trust someone else, when to fight for something bigger than yourself. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the boys finally collapsed from exhaustion, Victoria and Ethan found themselves on the South Terrace one more time, their place where so many important conversations had happened. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, pulling her close. "That a year ago this house was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. Now it's full of noise and laughter and life, and I love every chaotic moment of it, even when the boys flooded the bathroom trying to understand water pressure. Even then. Especially then, actually, because it means they're curious and exploring and not afraid to make mistakes. You've become quite the educator yourself." "I had a good teacher." They stood together, watching the last guest depart, watching their children sleep peacefully inside, watching the gardens that had once been Ethan's workplace transform into the backdrop for their shared life. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come home early that day?" Victoria asked. "If I hadn't heard Christopher laughing and followed the sound?" "All the time. I'd probably still be hiding, still be afraid, still be letting Marcus Reed define who I am, and I'd still be drowning in work, missing my son's childhood, convinced that control was the same as strength." "We saved each other," Ethan said simply. "Yeah, I think we did." 5 years later, the Hale Educational Foundation had expanded to serve over 200 schools across 15 states. Ethan's methodology was being used by thousands of teachers, helping tens of thousands of students discover that they were capable of more than they'd ever imagined. Christopher was 14 now, thriving in high school with plans to study engineering. He credited Mr. Cole, he still called him that sometimes, out of habit and affection, with teaching him how to learn, how to think, how to believe in himself. Daniel was 11, already showing signs of following in his father's footsteps. He talked about becoming a teacher, about helping kids the way his dad had helped Christopher. He had a relationship with Jennifer now, not close, but civil. She'd remarried again, moved to Arizona, sent cards on holidays. Daniel was okay with that. He had the family he needed right here. Victoria's company had grown too, but she'd learned to delegate, to trust others, to be present for the moments that mattered. She'd stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on the foundation, discovering that teaching millions of children to love learning was more satisfying than any corporate victory. And Ethan had become exactly what he was always meant to be, Not just a teacher, but an advocate for how education could transform lives. He spoke at conferences, published papers under his own name, mentored young teachers starting their careers. The methodology that Marcus Reed had tried to steal was now recognized worldwide as Ethan's contribution to education. Sometimes, late at night when the house was finally quiet, Victoria would walk through the halls and remember what this place used to be. A mausoleum to grief, a monument to loss, a palace of emptiness where silence reigned. Now it was a home, full of laughter and arguments and spontaneous science experiments, full of Christopher's friends coming over to study, full of Daniel's increasingly complex engineering projects scattered across every surface, full of Ethan's gentle corrections and patient explanations and terrible science jokes, full of life. One evening, as they prepared for the Foundation's annual gala, Victoria stood in her dressing room struggling with a necklace clasp. Ethan appeared behind her, taking over with steady hands. "There," he said, fastening it. "Perfect." She turned to face him. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not in at least 3 hours. I was starting to worry." "I love you. For staying when it would have been easier to run. For teaching our son that learning is joyful instead of painful. For showing me what courage really looks like. Right back at you. For believing in me when nobody else did. For fighting battles you didn't have to fight. For choosing truth over power when power would have been easier." They kissed, gentle and familiar, the kind of kiss that came from years of choosing each other daily. Downstairs, they could hear the boys arguing about something. Probably Christopher insisting that his physics knowledge meant he should control the TV remote. Helen was mediating, her patient voice carrying up the stairs. This was Victoria's empire now. Not boardrooms and quarterly reports, though those still existed. Not power and money, though she had plenty of both. This? A house full of love and noise and possibility. A foundation changing how children learn. A husband who made her better. 2 sons who were thriving. Some people measured success in dollars or market share or corner offices. Victoria had learned to measure it in moments like this. Christopher explaining quantum mechanics to Daniel over breakfast. Ethan falling asleep on the couch with a teaching journal on his chest. All 4 of them arguing about which documentary to watch on Friday nights. She'd built a tech empire from nothing. She'd survived grief that should have destroyed her. She'd fought powerful people and won. But her greatest achievement was this, creating a home where children could grow into their best selves, where a brilliant teacher could do his life's work, where laughter had replaced silence, where joy had overcome grief, where a family had been built from the ruins of loss. At the gala that night, as Ethan presented the Foundation's annual report to a crowd of donors and educators, Victoria watched from the audience with Christopher and Daniel on either side of her. "That's my dad," Daniel whispered proudly when Ethan took the stage. "That's my teacher," Christopher added, "the best one there is." "That's my husband," Victoria said quietly. "And I'm the luckiest person in the world." The presentation ended to thunderous applause. Ethan scanned the crowd until he found them, and his whole face lit up with that smile Victoria had fallen in love with. The one that said he'd finally stopped hiding, finally stopped running, finally started believing he deserved good things. Later, as they drove home through the city night, the boys asleep in the back seat, Ethan reached over and took Victoria's hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For hearing Christopher laugh that day and following the sound. For choosing to trust instead of fear. For fighting when I'd given up. For all of it." Victoria squeezed his hand. "You don't have to thank me. We saved each other, remember? Still, I want you to know this life we've built, this family, this work we're doing, it's everything I ever dreamed of and never thought I'd have. You gave that to me. We gave it to each other." They pulled through the estate gates, the house rising before them, all lit windows and warm light spilling onto the driveway. Home. As they carried sleeping boys to their beds and Helen fussed about how late it had gotten and the house settled into comfortable night sounds, Victoria stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the gardens. Somewhere out there was the cottage where Ethan and Daniel had first lived, the terrace where she'd confronted him about teaching Christopher, the study where it had all begun with the sound of a child's laughter. That laughter had changed everything, had led her on a journey from grief to hope, from silence to sound, from merely surviving to actually living. Richard would have been proud, she thought, proud of Christopher growing into such a thoughtful, curious young man, proud of how she'd learned to be present again, proud that she'd chosen to use her power for something that mattered. But more than that, she was proud. Proud of choosing courage over comfort, proud of fighting for justice when it would have been easier to look away. Proud of building something meaningful with Ethan, of creating a family that honored the past while embracing the future. Ethan appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How far we've come, how different life is now compared to a year ago. How grateful I am." "Me too." They stood together in the quiet dark, and Victoria realized this was what peace felt like. Not the absence of noise or struggle, but the presence of purpose. The knowledge that you were exactly where you were meant to be, with exactly who you were meant to be with, doing exactly what you were meant to do. She'd spent years believing that power meant control, that strength meant independence, that success meant never needing anyone. But she'd learned something better. True power was using your resources to lift others up. True strength was allowing yourself to be vulnerable. True success was measured in laughter and learning and love. And the right person didn't just change your life, they gave it back to you, fuller and richer and more meaningful than you'd ever imagined possible. Somewhere in the house, one of the boys stirred. Christopher's voice drifted down the hall. "Dad, can you help me with something?" Ethan kissed Victoria's cheek and went to help their son, because that's what fathers did, what teachers did, what good people did when someone needed them. Victoria stood alone for a moment longer, listening to the sounds of her home. Footsteps in the hallway, quiet conversation, the hum of life being lived fully and well. Then she smiled, turned off the light, and went to join her family. Because some things were more valuable than power or money or empire. And sometimes the right person didn't just change a life. They gave it back, with interest, with joy, with a future worth fighting for. And that was worth everything.